Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another Trek the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We're on Volume 23, Chapter 7. And what a cool little set of chapters here. Nothing crazy. Like, we got done with all that Nanahoshi stuff. The crazy amount of cooking I did back there, like single chapter Mushoku Mondays back there. We're going to get back into just kind of chilling. We got a lot of setup stuff that we're going to do here, getting into I'm assuming some crazy stuff up here in a minute. But yeah, kind of a chill set of 2 chapters. They're kind of long, so I'm hoping I can get to them pretty quickly and actually have 2 chapters in one Mushoku Monday for once in a while. But some good chapters, though. A lot of kind of world building around certain characters. And yes, getting to go see somebody again. It's been a while. We got to see how they're doing. Really excited to get into that stuff. Really kind of some sweet insights into characters and kind of seeing how they're doing, which is really cool. But yeah, as per usual, thank you guys so much for dropping by for the premiere. Hey, chat. Hope you guys are doing well. Happy Mushoku Mondays. Hope you guys have a great rest of your Monday after Mushoku Monday. And yes, greatly appreciate everybody's support, monetarily, kind words, all that stuff. And yes, especially through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships, all that stuff. We had last week's Inferno Torch with some massive amounts of supers. Once again, thank you so much, Inferno Torch, for your support. It means so much to me. District with a super, Totally Not an Ill with a super, Lou Frog with a super, Royce Moist with a set of supers, just throwing them at me. Kusha with some supers. Thank you so much, Kusha. Zydonix with a gifted membership, and Gearless once again. Like right at the very end. I think he just likes it. Like at the very end, coming and going, hey guys, before you leave, here you go. Here's a massive bomb. Thank you so much, Gearlace. It means so much to me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to everybody. You guys' kind words, support, all that stuff makes Mushoku Monday what it is. But with that said, I do have some things to go over. I forgot. Yes, I did say that once I finished the last Mushoku Monday, I was probably going to have a few things that popped in my head as I edit and whatnot. Sure enough, it was more so the idea that I meant to get into something, but I didn't. It was one of those ones where I'm like, oh, I'll wait to talk about that, and then I never talk about it. But yeah, when I was talking about the idea that Man-God never talks about Nanahoshi, it's super weird. It's really weird the Man-God has never, ever mentioned Nanahoshi. And I went back and I checked and I skimmed through most all the visits with the Man-God, and I didn't see it, so I may have missed it. But the one thing that popped in my head as I was thinking about that whole idea of why does the Man-God never talk about Nanahoshi, it's kind of important. And yes, you can say that he does know about Nanahoshi. I mean, easily, if he doesn't know based on their interactions throughout his time in the university, he has to at least know him based on the interactions with his future self. He knew that conversation. He listened to them. He knows they talked about. That's why he was so mad. But I mean, that gives me another indication here that that could be possibly why he's so mad is because of the discussion about Nanahoshi. But crazy theory here, and chat, zip chat, zip chat. I have I mean, it's one of those things where I think at some point I have claimed that every single person in this series is the Man-God. But that does lead me towards the idea of the possibility of the Man-God being Shinohara. And what if that's the case? Like, if they were all sent at different time frames, maybe Shinohara wasn't sent into the future. Maybe he was sent all the way back here, like, as the Man-God. Or was sent there and became the Man-God at some point. And that would explain why possibly he never messes with Nanahoshi. Because he does have feelings for Nanahoshi, he just doesn't want to mess with her. Could be possibly, and that would give him, if he has that power, to do that. Or maybe at some point he has that power to do that. But yeah, it made me believe, based on the fact that he's never mentioned Nanahoshi, he doesn't want to reveal to Rudius that he knows who Nanahoshi is. That would put him in a threat there. And so he hasn't been talking about her. I mean, that does get me into the point that came up during the last Mushoku Monday, is that when I was talking about the idea of how I was fearing the idea that the Man-God was going to send his forces in right when Rudius was doing that whole process of trying to send Nanahoshi to their old world, and that would be a good time to do it because Rudius would be like depleted in mana. Everybody's yelling like, oh my gosh, he can't see Rudius. He can't see what Rudius is doing. That's not really an argument. He can't see what Rudius is doing at that moment. It's like that fog effect that happens with the bracelet, and even if Orsted's there. But I don't get this argument that the Man-God can't do something there because he can't see what Rudius is doing, when that could be the argument for any time the Man-God wants to send somebody to attack Rudius. I mean, they know what Rudius is doing. If Rudius is not there, I don't know if he can not see Petagoose, but I assume he can see Petagoose. I'm assuming that he can see something going on there to know what's happening there. And all he has to do is that he knows that, okay, they're talking about how they're going to come there and do this ritual. Okay, I'll just send people to attack then. I don't know what's going to happen there, but I can at least know that something's going to happen there and send them to attack. Because that argument, if the argument is that he can't see Rudius, how would he ever know where Rudius is? How would Geese ever know where Rudius is? How could they ever send somebody to attack? If not there, then basically never. There would never be a time where they would ever attack Rudius because he never can see him. He obviously can see him in some way through conversations or at least seeing other people and them talk about what Rudius is doing. So that's just kind of my mindset there. I don't really understand this argument that because he can't see Rudius, he can never attack him. Because eventually, I would assume, I mean, I could be crazy. He's gonna attack Rudius. Geese is setting up to attack Rudius. It has information. He's getting information as to where Rudius is, and he will eventually find him and attack him. But anyways, that's kind of where my mindset was. It's not really so much that he can see what Rudius is doing. It's more so that he can find out what Rudius is doing through other people. My last thing that I had on here in my notes was the avoiding Galfalion. Now, I didn't really have too many theories on that last Mushoku Monday, but as I was editing, there was another thing that kind of popped in my head as to why Orsted didn't want Rudius to fight Galfalion. Now, again, my initial thought process there is that he might fear that Galfalion would beat the crap out of Rudius. He's fought him before. But there is an argument to be made that he hasn't fought him recently. He fought him a while back. Galfalion was getting stronger, wanting to fight him again. Obviously, we get an indication that Galfalion believes that he's never going to beat him anyways. That's why he's so discouraged and whatnot. But he wants to fight Orsted eventually. It kind of goes in line with my other thought process there that he didn't want him to fight Galfalion because Galfalion is important for something and he doesn't want him to beat him. But I wonder if it's because of what we see here, because of what that promise was. And remember way back in Geese's chapter, if that is Galfalion, the assumption here is that that's the case. And especially with this coming chapter, we kind of get an indication that, yeah, that kind of lines up there. Is what is the possibility that he didn't want him to fight Galfalion because he didn't want Galfalion to lose. Just strictly lose. Not just die, but just strictly lose because what happened to Galfalion when he lost? He became broken. Because again, he said that he would never lose to somebody again until he fought Orsted and beat Orsted. And what happened? Again, as we see in here coming chapter, he got beat, and that's what happened. He became he gave up. He gave up. So I can easily see that if Orsted needs Galfalion to do something, like maybe fight with, some certain source or something, he needs him to train somebody, he doesn't want him to get beat, otherwise Galfalion just becomes useless. He's no longer a tool that he can use. So that can seem to line up there, so I think that's it. I also had kind of question mark as to, I wonder if how they had to do the summoning and they got the bottle, like they mentioned the idea that they have to summon each component. And Rudius was talking about the idea of wondering if he can summon each piece to something and put it together. If the possibility that that's reversed as well, that when Nanahoshi sent herself or was going to send herself, did they have to construct the circle to send every single thing that's on her? Like send her coat, her pantsu, her skirt, everything that's in the backpack, what's the backpack itself, every component in order to send it all at the same time. That just makes that whole summoning circle even more crazier than it already is. So, and a lot of stuff to adjust. Anyways, that's that. Let's dive into Chapter 7, The Mad Dog's Old Stomping Grounds. Time to see how much Eris has changed. The Sword Sanctum was a bitterly cold place, blanketed in snow. Of the northern territories, it was a unique place. While a normal town at first glance, past the initial little town, there was a sword training hall. Its grounds were more extensive than any found in the Oscar Kingdom. Leading pupils clashed their swords, practicing the art of the sword god style. This was the Sword Sanctum. Summarized excerpt from Wandering the World by the adventurer Bloody Cant. I never found out if it was Cant or Kant. I just don't like saying the second one. It's probably the second one. Eris and Rudius made their way to the Sword Sanctum. I remember the Sword Sanctum showing up at the end of Wandering the World. This must mean that it's the very last place that Bloody Cant visited. I kind of wonder about that. That kind of seems like it's an interesting little thing to kind of note there. There's one side of it that kind of indicates this idea that what if this dude died at that point and then somebody took his writings and finished his book or whatever, but I don't know, it's an interesting note. The way the land here was described was way different than other places in the book. That really stuck out to me. That even adds more to it. Again, the way that it's described is different here. Reese chatted absent-mindedly, his face devoid of emotion as he strolled along. Eris could tell that he had his guard up. Guess you walked around this place regularly when you were training here, huh? Eris gazed around her surroundings. Thinking back now, she didn't visit the town often when she lived here. She dropped in a couple times for the sword god's bidding, but she wasn't the leisurely stroll type. I didn't have time for that. Given its size, it was more like a village than a town. When Eris lived in Roa, back when everything felt new, She often wandered around. Same was true when she moved to Soraya and took up habits of walking Leo. This town, however, inspired no urge to roam for her. This simply wasn't the place for it, at least in her mind. Well, yeah, I mean, when I read this, it's like a given aspect here that when she was here, what was her focus? I have to get stronger to be at Rui's side. Plain and simple. Like, the idea of having a leisurely stroll or whatever doesn't make sense here. Back when she was, in her hometown, yeah, she wanted to see new things. She wanted to go out. She wanted to do things. She was aspiring for things. And then you have jump forward, get beat by Orsted, wants to stand at Rudius' side, wants to protect Rudius, wants to be stronger. Focus, 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 swing sword, swing, 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 swing. I don't care about doing this other stuff. Okay, my trainer says to go to this. All right, I have to. He's training me. And then afterwards, after the fight with Orsted, where's her mind go to? Okay, we're good. We're good. Everything with Orsted's good right now. She's still getting stronger, but then she's able to do other things. She's able to just kind of run around with Leo. There's sure a lot of smithies and weapon shops. Yeah, only swordsmen bothered to take up residency here, and most had their sword at their hip. That wasn't to say that everyone here was practitioners of the sword god style, but it was commonplace to be armed. A squabble broke out in the middle of the streets. Two people drew their blades and stared down at each other. A second later, launched their attacks. Barely anyone spared a glance before shuffling away. No cheers, no jeers, just routine. Eris could tell that neither combatant was particularly skilled, probably intermediate tier at best. One quick glance told her that neither of them intended to kill each other. What the? Stand up straight and walk properly. As Rudius trembled behind Eris' tide, Eris barked at him. He would have no problem taking the two of them out, or anyone around for that matter. Eris knew that his magic was way faster than the average swordsman, even at close range. Besides, Rudius was an intermediate tier himself. Perhaps that kept him humble. It's just that I don't want to get into it with anyone. Getting into spats like that will only have a bad effect on later negotiations. Times like this, it's almost a guarantee that I lure unsavory sorts who want to pick a fight. I want to avoid a mess like that as much as possible. I have this trauma. It keeps happening. I just want to have a nice, normal visit. I just want to come in here, talk to people, get a yes or no, and then leave. I don't want to turn into a whole entire volume of stuff. Come on, please. You'll be fine. You think? These guys are chumps. You could take them. That's not what I meant. It's like, you're not going to have a problem with these guys. You'll just beat them up. It was then that Eris sensed an ill intent in the area. She jerked her head to face the direction that it was coming from. Rudius followed her gaze. Crap, see? People overhear you, and then this happens. A man glowered murderously at Eris, veins protruding from his forehead. Hey there, girlie. Those are fighting words. He started towards Eris, but then once she fixed him with a death glare, he froze up, color drained from his face. He tore his gaze away, and the rest of his body soon followed. Just literally beat him by looking at him. Humph. Eris sniffed at him. He probably hurt her, and been awash with relief. One step further, and he would have lost his head. See? I think your intimidating presence drove him off. Rudius sparkled like a maiden swooning over her husband's manly display of strength. In the past, Eris would have grunted triumphantly, but there was no pride in small fries like that. Rudius could have taken him. Murmurs began to fill the air, people recognizing the Berserker Sword King. No one wanted to set her off. Eris, what did you do? Nothing. Everybody's afraid of her. She was truthful. She hadn't done anything to these people. It was possible that she didn't remember, but a majority of them were too talentless to enter the hall. Not all of them. Some practitioners would visit the town for supplies and mingle with the townspeople. All right then. Rudius, convinced, kept himself glued to her back as they made their way through the town. He just grabbed on the back. Let's go. Seriously, why are you hiding? It's not that I'm hiding. It's just, you look really dashing from behind, you know? He's such the wife. He's such the wife. It's not like I think you've pummeled each and every one of these townspeople with your fists, and now they're thirsty for revenge. Nope, not at all. I really haven't done anything to them. Eris knew that Rudius would come to her aid if needed. With strangers, he just didn't handle confrontations well. You'll be fine. Now let's go. As she marched along, people cleared the path. She moved forward with her head held high, not the least bit bothered. The vastness of the sword sanctum surpassed Rudius' imagination. Whoa, this place is huge. Buildings constructed of stone and wood, and somehow bore close resemblance to Japanese martial arts arenas. The state of the complex suggests the construction was more ancient than the nearby town. Yeah, I can assume that. They probably had the sword sanctum there, and then probably at some point, as people started gathering there more, they started building around it. The view from the front was hardly adequate enough to sense the place's size, but he could tell there were quite a few buildings. It was likely expanded and altered over the years, culminating in a sprawling structure it was. It is kind of interesting that they keep noting throughout this entire chapter the idea that it's like it resembles Japanese martial arts arena. The placement of itself looks like a dojo and what like that. And I guess I could have picked that up essentially with a lot of the chapters with Eris. but it's kind of interesting how much they talk about how it's sort of inspired by seemingly Japanese architecture. Indicates that somebody from Japan a long time ago. Ryu spotted a young man near the gate. He carried a shovel, which he was using to clear the snow. Probably a student, likely chilled to the bone. Looks like he's gonna freeze. He does? Seems normal to me. Her answer confirmed Maurice's fears that there really was a rule against coats. The place was practically the athletic capital of the world. If someone complained, they would probably be told they lacked willpower. Excuse me? Yes, what is it? The moment the man glanced up to see Eris, he gasped. The shovel fell from his hand, and he scrambled inside the training hall. Are you sure you didn't do anything? I trained with him a number of times. The poor guy must be traumatized. Rurius can empathize. Back when they lived in Roa, he trained with Eris daily, and she beat him to a bloody pulp. Back then, she didn't know the meaning of holding back. He could imagine that she was much more fiercer now. Dauntless about improving her skills. She was more powerful than ever. The guy was lucky that he still had teeth. This kind of seems weird. I mean, yeah, he did train with her back then, but he also has been training with her recently, so I don't really understand the idea of like, yeah, I trained back here and she was super brutal, and so he must have had a rough. I mean, you know how she is because you've trained with her now. Now, I think that she probably had less self-control when she was training here until she started to kind of form herself and started hanging out with, you know, everybody else and gaining friends and everything with like Nina and everything. But yeah, Rudius has tasted her blade since then. While lost in thought, Ed started making her way inside the training hall. Hey, hold up a second. Why? Is it really okay for us to just waltz in? Yes. Like, I've been here all the time. It's like my old stomping grounds. She shot back, exasperated, as he briskly strode in. Reese had no choice but to fall close at her heel. Plus, she used to be the sword god's apprentice. Surely she had a free pass to enter. Still, Reese would rather have a guide escort them to the reception hall. Await anxiously for the sword god to receive them. Reese would launch into diplomatic conversation with his best salesman smile. That would be preferred over marching in like they owned the place. A flurry of footsteps came echoing down towards them. Several men in training uniforms were heading their way, carrying real swords. They thought they were intruders. Eris? One of them gasped in surprise. One of them was actually a woman. Slightly dark skin, navy blue hair, and sharp, menacing eyes. Her movements were sharp and well practiced, leaving no opening. Even an amateur at swordplay, like Rudius, could tell she was tough. Nina. Then Rudius realized he met this girl before. I totally forgot about the coronation. I thought for some reason he was recalling the moment that he met her at the university, and I'm like, really? That far back? Oh, never mind. He actually met her at the coronation. For a brief moment, I forgot about that. He was pretty sure it was at Ariel's coronation. Nina, indeed, a formidable fighter that could go toe-to-toe with Eris. From what he remembered, she promised to aid them whenever they needed. Talk was cheap, though. There was no guarantee that she would follow through. Very true. And again, this has kind of been my massive question mark for her for a while now, especially now with what's going on with Galfalion, is would she even bother? Was she even kind of devoted or interested in actually doing that? Reese, I like here is actually acknowledging the idea that unless he does a really solid favor, like with Randolph or whatever, and even with Randolph, he's like, no. If Randolph wasn't tied down, I think that he probably would help them with what he's basically done for him. Nina, it's been a while. Yes, it has. Why are you here? Ed jerked her shoulder at Reese's direction. Reese wants to talk to him. Reese flashed his business smile. A pleasure to make your acquaintance. I am Rudius Greyrat. I have come to him. Nina didn't so much spare him a glance. The sword god. Nina's face hardened. A sudden aura of venomous hostility poured from her. Edis stood firm, while Rudius's legs went jelly. He was confused. They were here just to meet him. There was no need for them to act like they were ready to murder him. Galfalion, is he not here? Nina's expression softened to guard his suspicion before finally relaxing. You should at least call him master. No way. Gilane's my only master I have. Yeah, well, whatever. Nina breathed in a deep sigh. The rest of you go ahead. I'll explain everything to Edis. But Lady Nina, now isn't the time to. This is the Berserker King Edis we're talking about. Startled, the men stared at Edis. There was no telling what mayhem she had been up to. But her name was enough to convince them to back down. It's like this entire chapter is literally really saying, this girl has destroyed this place, hadn't she? What did she do? What did she do? I'm sorry for Edis. I'm sorry for it. What did she do? All right, this way. Nina guided them to one of the main training buildings, apparently a drill hall. The room had wooden flooring and wooden swords hung up on the wall. It reminded Rudius of a Japanese kendo hall. Nina strode forward until she arrived at the middle of the room and then plopped down. Edis followed suit, sitting with her left leg folded and their right knee raised. Rudius thought at first that it was an inappropriate posture for a girl, but Ghislaine taught him how to sit that same way. It was a posture that made it easy for swordsmen to get back on their feet and draw. This meant that if the urge struck Nina, she could take Rudius's head in an instant. Nina, Reese can't sit this close. It would put him at range of your blade. Really? Your husband is a coward. He's a mage. He's practical. The atmosphere was tense. I mean, it is true. Reese considered plucking up his courage and sitting close. He was here to see the sword god. So, he was resolved to take some risk. Excuse me. I mean no disrespect. I was merely overwhelmed by the air of this place. Reese sat down next to Eris and activated his eye of foresight to be on the safe side. Nina finally rested her gaze on him. Very interesting. I'd imagine like earlier, when they first came in again, it was kind of emphasizing this idea that Reese keeps hiding behind Eris the entire time, and they're coming in there. And so he could very well be like, oh crap, and hiding. And she kind of nudged towards him or pointed towards him with her shoulder. It kind of insinuates that he's constantly hiding. And so yes, even when they first greet each other, she's not going to listen to him because he's this coward sitting behind her. And she already doesn't like this guy. Again, remember back here when we first read that letter that he sent in, both of the girls thought that he was nasty. But right here, he's showing that he's a coward because he's hiding behind Eris the entire time. So why is Nina going to pay him any attention? And so right here, it's not until he sits down next to Eris that she finally acknowledges him. Oh, so we are equals. We're somewhat equals here. Let's talk. So why have you come? There's a certain individual that I'll be going to battle with, and I was hoping to enlist the sword god's aid. Her eyebrows knit in confusion. I thought you weren't going to need help with any battles for several decades. Oh, I see. Remember our conversation from the King of Asra. Thank you for that. Reese was genuinely impressed. Of course I remember. I'm not Eris. The hard and fast rule for communicating with the Sword God Styles practitioners was to keep things frank and easy to understand. They were as erratic as Etov, but they tended to go on the offense if the mood went sour. Even someone with delicate features like Nina was no exception. What I said back then hasn't changed, but I am here on a different matter. I will be fighting a man named Geese, see? I'm sure the sword god must be very busy indeed, but if you can kindly put me in contact with him. Nina pulled a face. Reese assumed that she didn't trust him to meet the man. Anyways, I also brought a gift to present to the sword god. Something I'm sure he'll like. Reese had brought a minor blade, forged by the master smith, Kulkin, 100 years ago. According to Orsted, the sword god was a sword connoisseur who had collected a no small number of blades. This one in particular was special to him, because it was one he desperately longed for in his youth. Over several decades, this blade passed down from owner to owner, until it landed in the hands of a middling nobleman in the Asra kingdom. This nobleman lived a life that never required him to use a sword. It may have well remained there forever, decorating his parlor. Tragically, for him, Reus used Ariel's name to cozy up to him. Reus visited, peppered him with compliments. Then in exchange for favors, Reus obtained the blade. I wonder if this is a particular gray rat. Because he says tragically for him. I wonder. Or I guess it could have been her brother, but I would think they would name that as royalty. Let me clarify one last time. This person you want to meet is Galfalion, correct? Huh? Well, yeah, that's right. She phrased it as if there was another sword god around. Then he's not here. Oh, I see. Yeah, right here I'm already guessing. Yeah, I mean, somebody had to have taken the title. And I mean, the question mark for me was more in the idea of, did he give up the title and just walk out? Is that a possibility that he can actually do that? Or, yes, did someone beat him? I mean, we know that somebody beat him. It was the question mark was just who? Oh, I see. So where is he gone? And when will I expect him to return? Who knows? I doubt he ever will. Huh? Something was definitely off. Eris had narrowed her eyes in suspicion. What do you mean? Nina's expression sobered as she looked to Eris' stare. She opened her mouth to speak, but her brow furrowed and no words came out. Whatever was going on, it was difficult to speak of. Maybe he was in Asra, getting hemorrhoid surgery. I think they mentioned the fact that he had that. So wrong. Sword God Galfalion, lost in combat. Eris' lips thinned. Against who? Gino Brits. We can assume at this point that the three, again, assuming it's only three. I still believe there's going to come a time where they're going to drop the idea that there's actually a fourth. Assuming there's only three people that the man god is currently talking to, you think that would be the North god, Galfalion, and Geese. But again, my confusion's always been twofold. One, is it only really three? And two, during what periods of time? How long has this been going? At what points he's able to switch? If the idea of the current turning point is him going to the point where they fight Rudius, then yes, those are the three, and we're not going to see anybody else be a disciple until that fight happens. But if he's actually building towards something with turning points, going up to the point of actually fighting Rudius, and only seeing a short periods of bursts of seeing people's futures or whatever, then there's a possibility that somebody else can be a disciple besides those three. This right here made me believe it might be Gino. Because at no point in what we hear about Gino here coming up does it ever say, yeah, there was one time that he did beat Galfalion. This right here makes me believe that Gino was pushed to fight Galfalion. Now, the other theory that I have here is the only reason that he fought Galfalion and beat him was because he now has experienced love, and that made him stronger, and he goes off and fights Galfalion because he wants to be strong for her. So that was the big change, is that everything that happened with Rudeus, and I mean, we're seeing the effect of the butterfly effect here. Because in this timeline, Eris meets Rudeus, gets stronger, does all this stuff, trains alongside her, basically shows her love, shows her what love is. Suddenly out of nowhere, she falls in love with Gino Britz. They get married, and then bam, he gets stronger, and bam, he beats the sword god. That's showing that effect, that cause and effect that Eris is having to the life of Nina. But it makes me believe that the only reason that the sword god was even out there for him to manipulate is because he told Gino how to beat Galfalion. Showed him some sort of trick. Basically told him step by step how you can beat that guy. And he pulled it off. Which makes me wonder, is Gino Britz even that strong? I mean, they've implied several times that he's not to the standards of a lot of other people. But how did he beat Galfalion? Did he really get that strong that fast? Or did the man god slip him a little info? Slip him a little info on how to beat Galfalion. Always attack from this side. When he strikes like this, do this. He's weak that way. Or attack him at this particular time when he's the most tired, or he's thinking about something. Or did the man god mess with him in some way when he talked to him originally that put him in a vulnerable state? I don't think the sword god would have let Gino beat him because Gino beating him messed him up bad. He fought Gino with the intention to win because when he lost to Gino, it broke him mentally. But he could have told him something that made him weak. Eris's eyes shot wide open. Gino Britz, as far as Rudeus could remember, was a sword saint. His strength paled in comparison to Eris and Nina. According to Orsted, he had talent, but whether anything come of it was highly contingent on factors that had little to do with the man himself. Again, marrying Nina. That could have changed him. But to that level, that's the question mark. So if Gino beat sword god Galfalion, that would mean... What you mean is that the current sword god is Mr. Gino Britz? Yes, my father. No, I mean the sword god Galfalion left the sword sanctum the day he lost. She added that she had no idea where he was. Reese was at a loss. He also felt bad for making her discuss something that was probably difficult for her. She was bound to hold her father in high regard, so his loss to a younger swordsman had to come as a shock. This wasn't merely a changing in leadership. Nina herself had been suppressed by someone who was supposed to be inferior to her. Nope. There's a lot of misconceptions that Rudeus has in this chapter and the next chapter. He fled in embarrassment, Eris muttered under her breath. Now Eris was antagonizing the scary sword lady. A chill ran down Rudeus' spine, and his hair on his body stood on end. He could picture Nina leaping to her feet and drawing her blade. Thankfully, this was just his imagination. She remained seated calmly. Yeah, I figure that's true. Gino always was inexperienced and unskilled compared to the rest of us. But he's not now? No, not anymore. Gino is stronger than anyone else out there. Of that much, I am certain. Now, this makes me believe that it's not simply that he's super weak and he was told a trick. Now, he could have been told how to get stronger really fast. But this implies that, yes, after everything with Nina, he got a lot more skilled. I guess having a driving force, a reason. The power of love. We're getting into the power of love. Sappy crap, Refuge. Are we actually got to get into this whole power of love crap? Because that's a surprising thing. It's implying that he got super strong really fast. This is a really fast boost. Again, this is somebody that used to, when Eris was there, he was weaker, much weaker. And then in a span of years, what we're talking about now, 2 years? In a span of 2 years, he got this strong to take down the sword god? That's hard to imagine. A mixture of emotion played across Nina's face as she spoke of him, some part fear and rest admiration. This makes me think something's happened. Like, yeah, I can see her having a fear of how strong he's gotten. And again, they're together, and it implies here in a minute that she's pregnant, probably with his child. Gino's strength had to be the real thing for her to react like that. Reeves figured it might be rude, but he could ally with Gino Britz instead. The only issue is that Orsted gave him no data, nor did Rudeus have a gift for him. He could accept the sword, but that might not bring him much joy. It only had significance to Falion.
If he was strong enough to climb up and claim the title of Sword God, he could have a violent disposition. Considering negotiations might fail, it would probably be best to pull back for now. On the other hand, having come all the way here, it would be best to at least speak with him. Eris, do you feel like fighting Gino? What do you mean? Right now, you could become Sword God if you beat him. Eris shrugged. Not interested. Nina breathed a sigh of relief. Okay, yeah, right. I figured. That's good to hear. It's like good old Eris, the same old Eris. She don't care. He offered it to him when she first got the title. Like, he's like, hey, you could beat, Ghislaine over here. You can beat me. You want something else? No, don't care. She was just there to train under him. And he said, I taught you everything. That's all she wanted. She didn't need a title. Orsa said there was people who became Sword God, only to disappear as time marched on, lost in the annals of history. It wasn't a system of hereditary succession after all. Sword God was a title bestowed upon the strongest of the style. That was why the moment the ring Sword God lost, they lost their position. For most, defeat spelled death. It wasn't just a loss of status, but of life. All you had to do to become Sword God was to beat the previous one. If the Sword God fell to someone outside the style, his strongest people would take his place. Whatever the case, there was a number of Sword Emperors and Sword Kings who were no less skilled than their higher-ranked counterparts. That made it easy to guess what a regime change would be like. Chaos within the Sword Sanctum. The same had happened when Galfalion succeeded the title. Those of roughly equivalent strength, from emperors to king, decided to challenge him to steal the title. There were sword gods who only stood for a single day before stripped of the title and falling into obscurity. The same could easily happen to Gino Britz. This stuff is super cool and fascinating to me. I love how much attention to detail that Refugien does with things like this. Because it could be simply the idea of, you beat somebody, you take their title. That's just how it is. Moving on to the next conversation. What it's sort of playing out here, and it's interesting because later on it talks about how the North God style is different. Here it's saying specifically, of course, if you're the sword god, if somebody comes in and beats you, they take the title. Now, yes, typically with a person of that skill, and yes, not wanting to give it up, that is going to mean death. Like, Galfalion could very well not want to give it up. I would think that in most cases, it's going to be death, or at least dismemberment, to lose the title, because you're going to fight until the very end. You're not going to give it up. Why would you give it up? You're not going to let somebody just, I give. You're really strong. Here you go. Here's the title. No, you're going to fight to death. So it's very kind of rare, the idea that somebody would actually live. Interesting that they point out the idea that if somebody of another style were to beat the sword god, it would just fall to the next person, which is kind of curious. If they live, why would they do that? Even if the North God beats the sword god, why would that mean, and doesn't kill them, why would that mean that would fall to the next person? I'm assuming what they mean here is if somebody of the outside kills them, it would go to the next person. Because I don't see that just, I got beat by them, so that means the next person that's weaker than me is going to take the title. But it makes sense to me, the idea that the moment that somebody takes the title, everybody will clamor in going, well, I've beat them before, so why not? Nina could have that mindset if she wasn't in the position that she is, of course. She could have that mindset. I beat him so many times. If he beat Galfalion, I could beat him. And that's what all these emperors would think. So yes, of course, with that change of the current holder, everybody's going to be clamoring in. Holy crap, let's get it. It's like vultures. Vultures come swarming in, and that's what they're having right now. Is you have all these people kind of questioning, Nina especially, if it seems like it's kind of implying that she's leading this group to kind of go, okay, back off, everybody, back off. And Gino's back there going, I got it. They're just kind of saying, no, stop. You're not going to take it from him. Chill. And yes, similar to when Galfalion was in there, you had to go through these other people before you got to him. He ain't going to waste his time on everybody that wants the title. With everything changing, they're basically trying to chill everybody out and say, you can't take it. You're not going to take it. And it could be in an aspect of respecting who took the title. Who respects him taking the title, and who's going to respect his power. It's cool. It's cool stuff. What about you, Nina? Not going to try for Sword God? I can't even consider that an option. Nina stroked her belly. She was acting kind of cagey. Reese wondered if she was having her period or something. No, maybe constipation. Reese is so stupid sometimes. Reese is so stupid. Most of the time he corrects it, but come on, Rudius, really? But again, this is him looking at a bunch of crazy, vicious wolves. Like, he just sees all these people as just dumb, violent people. The idea that the person in front of him could be somebody that is with a child, which, by the way, congrats, Nina. I mean, yes, it could just be has cramps. But I mean, in the conversation here, it makes sense that it is 99% going to be that she's pregnant. And yes, the assumption here is that we know the father. And so, yes, it makes sense, the idea that she's going to be like, no, I can't. One, because I have a child with me. I don't want to harm the child. But two, I don't want to kill the child's father. And it would explain why she's doing so much to protect him right now. It's really cool. Nina has learned about love. She's a mama now. So cool. Glancing to Eris, she was shocked by the answer, apparently caught off guard. Oh, Eris's face fell, giving away disappointment and despondency. Reese didn't know much about their relationship, save for the fact they were the same age, and not many could stand as Eris's equal and befriend her. Reese had no idea about Eris's feelings towards Nina. Reese could tell, though, that Nina was Gino Britz's ally. She had become Sword King before Gino had, and was older than him, but that hadn't stopped her from recognizing his strength and legitimacy as a new sword god. The way that she had spoken showed that, until she had heard Eris's answer, she worried Eris was yet another one to come challenge Gino for his title. If it was Eris's intention, Nina might have wanted to challenge her first. Again, that's sort of the indication here when they first came there, is they probably rushed forward saying, another person. Here's another person doing this. And yeah, it could probably have been that guy ran in there and said, the Berserker Sword King's here. He's probably come to claim the title. But again, it's like one of those aspects of, has she ever cared? Why would you have that impression there? But again, they're probably taking caution here. This is probably an hourly, if not daily, occurrence that somebody comes in to challenge. It was only now that Nina lowered her knee, tucking her legs under her. Would it be possible to pay respects to the new sword god? Not right now. He already has his hands full. I had a feeling he would say that. No doubt swordsmen from all the world flooded to the sword sanctum right now. Reese didn't know how many were sword emperors or kings, but on top of that, there were likely those from other denominations who came. Nina and the rest, who had accepted Gino as a sword god, were playing the role of weeding out the unworthy. Reese thought that Eris was a little bit advanced for Nina to be weeding her out, but he figured that was probably not the reason for the private meeting. She just wanted to lay out the situation in private. She seemed to know Eris well. Perhaps she thought that if she left Eris to her own devices, their Berserker Sword King might have well charged right into the depths of the sanctum and picked a fight with Gino. I don't think she cares. She wouldn't care. I mean, he might feel that she is there to attack him and she would, retaliate, but Reese would correct her that their Eris was far more mature than she once was. And I think that Nina is picking that up. If you want to talk to Gino, things should calm down here in a little while. You can come back then. Reese nodded. All right then. Oh, but just in case, I'd like to ask something. A man named Geese hasn't come by here, has he? He's a demon with a face like a monkey. Demon folk? Here? Most likely not, no. Have you had any dreams where a man who insists he's a god and tries to pass a divine message? She quirked her brow, confused. No? Nina shot Eris a look, silently demanding to know what this is all about. Eris glared back, annoyed that Nina would expect her to explain. Reese admitted it was an odd question. If not, nothing to worry about. The two I mentioned were infamous scammers, so if they ever do show up, be very careful. Got it. Sword Sanctum was a big flop. Reese planned to look into Galfalion's whereabouts later, but for now, they could do nothing but excuse themselves. In that case, I've done all I've come here to do. He looked at Eris. What about you? Would you like to look around some more? This place brings back memories for you. No need. Well, we'll come here again later, Nina. Sounds good, Eris. Come back whenever things settle down more. Their voices grew more gentler as they bid their farewells. Leaving the training hall, they heard a cacophony of noises from deeper within the complex. Either Gino was battling, or his sympathizers were taking down would-be challengers. Eris paused for a moment, looked back over her shoulder. She folded her arms, legs spread, shoulder-width apart, as always, and lips were pursed. Reese wondered if he upset her. However, her eyes were set on the training hall. What's the matter? It's like, I don't even know this place anymore. Her expression was clouded with indescribable sorrow. It was rare to see this emotion from her. Even when she gazed upon the desolate Fatoa region, she remained undaunted. However, she was prepared to see that. This time, she returned to an old familiar stomping grounds, certain nothing would be different. It would be like graduating high school. Then the return to find your old club had changed members. Atmosphere and goals changed with it. It's then that you're hit with a feeling that there's no place for you there anymore. Reese never took part in clubs, so all that knowledge came from manga. I kind of get this, though. I kind of find this interesting, the idea that when they first arrived there, yes, technically Eris had prepared herself. And there was so much stuff about like her parents and everything, too. It was like she was already prepared. Like she already kind of assumed this stuff would happen, that things weren't going to be good when they got back there. She had prepared herself. I think she was still impacted. It's just that she didn't want to express it. She felt like she had to be strong a lot in that regard. And again, I think when they first got to the refugee camp, a lot of that was that in her mind at the time, all she could think about right there was Orsted. That's what she was thinking about a lot of the time, was Orsted. I gotta get stronger. And I think that kind of clouded a lot of that feeling there. Her life came centered around Rudius. She had found love. She had left the nest, basically. By that point, in her mind, I think she had left the nest. And she also was prepared for what was to come. So I think it kind of didn't affect her that much. But I think no matter what, it affected her. It's just that she's not going to express that stuff. And even when they came back there later on and they were kind of traveling past there to go to Asura, I think even then it wasn't really affecting her. It wasn't her home at that point. She'd already given it up. This, I think, is probably impacting just because it's something that was familiar with her. She gained a lot from it. And then when she comes back to the whole location, yeah, she can see that things aren't normal. It's something that she lived there for a long time, and everything is not playing out like it used to. And I think a lot of it could be that she feels that it's not as strong anymore. With so much chaos and confusion happening, she could feel like everybody is weakened. That the chaos itself shows weakness, in a sense. Whereas when she came there before and Galfalion was heading it, everything was strict. It was strong. She walked in the door. Galfalion stood up, wrecked her down. He was strong. Everything was order. And now it's chaos. And that boy that was super weak before is leading it. Yeah, it's not what I remembered. Until somebody finally challenges her. And I think there is a sense here that when she first came here and she's walking through the village and going up to the Sword Sanctum, she's waiting for somebody to challenge her. Let's fight. Let's fight. This is a strong people. I used to fight people here all the time. We used to duel each other all the time. Okay, we go in here. We sit down. We're talking. Let's fight. Let's fight. Oh, you gonna take the title? No, I can't. Oh, you're pregnant, so we're not gonna fight. I think there's a lot of sense here of being kind of they'll discourage the idea that nobody duel anymore, like nobody fight anymore, which makes it more interesting that she doesn't go and fight Gino just to fight him. Reese then noticed a man carrying 2 wooden swords hurrying towards them from the training hall. It was the man who was shoveling earlier. He tossed one sword at her at incredible speed, and she easily caught it. A loud clap echoed as it smacked against her palm. After asking for a practice round, she accepted without missing a beat. Reese backed off to observe the match. He was honestly having a little trouble following what was going on. Conversations between Sword God-style practitioners were barely a series of grunts, and actions that followed them were physical and abrupt. Eris held her sword high, while a student held his closer to the center. Reese prayed that she wouldn't go overboard. Next moment, a sharp inhale broke through the still air. The student's form blurred. Eris chose in an instant to make her move. A metallic clang echoed, and before Reese knew what was happening, the student was on one knee. In the space they had occupied scant seconds earlier, a puff of air curled, his lingering breath, which disappeared as his sword came crashing down, stabbing into the snow. It happened in a flash. Reese only followed what happened thanks to his eye of foresight. The student unleashed his sword of light. Eris returned that in kind. The scary thing for Rudius was that this young guy, who was shoveling snow moments earlier, came at Eris with a technique like Sword of Light. He's like, this is over here, he's just doing like measly work, and then he's like busts out Sword of Light. That shows this guy is extremely strong. At least Sword Saint. Reese questioned if he was still alive, if he was having a crazy dying dream. Afterwards, Eris pointed out the weakness in the man's grip at the end of his swing. He thanked Eris before bowing his head. She grunted at him and tossed the wooden sword to the ground before walking to Rudius. I do like this. This is kind of one of those kind of subtle notes here. Again, before Eris left here, she was the Berserker Sword King, and she's just running around fighting people. She was people found her very violent. Like, to the standards of the practitioner of the sword guy style, which is pretty crazy, I know. She was seen as like a wild animal. And so that's why she got her title. But now she's returned. She meets Nina. And then she comes back out, and this guy's like, yes, I can challenge her again. Like, this guy is excited to try his luck at her. He knows that she's incredibly strong. And yes, she mentioned before that he's practiced with her before. What a shock to this guy that after they duel and she beats him, that she suddenly goes, here's your flaw. This guy's shocked. What? She's pointing out what I did wrong. She's teaching him. This is a different Eris. This has got to be super shocking to him. This is a different Eris. We used to fight each other all the time. We used to duel each other all the time. But now she's being a teacher. This is how much Eris has changed. This is a massive change for this girl. As compared to what she was when the last time this guy's seen her to now, she's now training tons of people back at home. This is something that's normal to her. This is natural to Eris at this point, that whenever she is, interacting with somebody, she's trying to teach them. She's become a teacher. She's no longer just a vicious animal that just wants to get stronger, that this guy used to know her as. She's now a teacher. It's super cool. It shows how much Eris has changed. Everything that we have witnessed Throughout this entire encounter of them going to the Sword Sanctum, that is the biggest sign to these people she's changed. What? She pursed her lips and glared at him when she noticed that he was looking at her. Oh, nothing. A significant weight lifted from her shoulders. Her expression said what she would not. This was how the place was supposed to be. We settle everything by fighting. Let's fight. Let's fight. She was so excited to come there and fight. The place is in a bit of disarray, with everything going on. I'm sure that when it dies down, it'll be exactly as you remembered it. Whatever, I don't care. In spite of her protests, she looked a bit relieved to hear that. They'd be back again, provided they lived through their battle with geese. Their visit to the Sword Sanctum came to a close. It was a bit of a dud, but such was life. Even if Galfalion was no longer the sword god, he'd still make a formidable ally in battle. Reese would leave tracking him down to his mercenary band, while locating someone else. North god Kalman III. Don't do it, Rudius! Don't do it, Rudius! Don't do it! Don't do it! Don't do it! Again, I'm still convinced the North god is who Geese ran into. It's like we're doing in succession right now. Galfalion, we're looking for him. Nope, bad choice. Kalman, bad choice. Let's be truthful, there's still a chance that he could recruit one of the two of them, despite the fact that they've been messed with by the Man God. And again, the Man God has promised them some crazy things, which makes it very difficult for him to win them over. There's still a chance that Reese can win these people over. God, here's the long chapter, too. I hope I can get through this. I'm going to try. We might cut it off at some point. We're going to try. Chapter 8, A North God, an Adventurer, and more. North God Kalman was one of 3 heroes that cooperated to slay the demon god Laplace. That said, North God Kalman I was rather boring when compared to the fellow heroes. Armored Dragon King Pedagogus and Dragon God Utapin. Naturally, he was also less famous. If an exam required a person to name 3 god slayers, no doubt the one the students would struggle to remember would be North God Kalman. It wasn't until North God Kalman II that the name became famous. The holder of that title was Alex Ryback. He traveled through the world, leaving tales of heroic deeds in his wake. These stories were later recounted by troubadours and novelists who spread the legend further. With so many telling the tales, the story took lives of their own. Point being, the North God was only famous because the second guy to bear the title. It's very interesting, and I think it kind of implied this stuff sprinkled throughout all these little depictions of what happened in little excerpts here and there. But I do like the idea of Refugin taking a moment to kind of, let's put it all together. We've been kind of sprinkling it here and there because, okay, we need to talk about this aspect here. Oh, right now we're talking about Pedagogus and the 3 God Slayers, so let's kind of mention them here. This is finally going, okay, let's piece it all together. I do like this kind of stuff. So even though you're kind of retreading a lot of grounds here, it's at least kind of forming it into a full mold. North God Kalman I made an appearance in the legend of Pedagogus, but he was still more of a support character than anything. In it, Kalman was portrayed as a swordsman with incredible technique. How incredible? He was able to defeat the Demon King Atov single-handedly. Those sword skills saved Pedagogus on multiple occasions. He and his 7 companions triumphed on their dangerous journey and survived the Laplace War. Sure, Kalman was impressive in his own right, but he couldn't manipulate an entire floating fortress like Pedagogus could. He didn't encroach on Laplace's territory with 12 subordinates, face Laplace one-on-one like Utapin, or have any notable episodes to make him memorable. Instead, his subtle strength supported 2 more renowned members from the shadows. There was more to his story than just that, however. In the wake of the Laplace War, the demon god's remaining forces continued to resist across the lands their masters had conquered. That was when Kalman went all by himself to face the Demon King Atov. After a protracted battle, he at last claimed victory over her. None knew what happened in the immediate aftermath. What they did know is that he wound up marrying Atov, forcing her to back out of the battles she was still fighting. The loss of an esteemed warrior like Atov dealt a heavy blow to Laplace's forces, and so the world was soon again at peace. He made the ultimate sacrifice. It's like making it out like he made the ultimate sacrifice at marrying Atov. I was kind of hoping that it would say how. It just said that he was extremely skilled, and he was so skilled that he took her down. But how? She can regenerate herself. Why would she give up? Was the attack so incredible that she likes him? I don't know. That's the weird thing. Kalman was truly responsible for putting an end to the entire war. Granted, what he did was positively insane. How else could you classify riding into battle against Atov alone, beating her, then marrying her? Pedagogus's legend had painted him as a dim, reserved light, but the facts suggest that he was nuts. Still, his power was the real deal. Ruiz could understand why he'd won so much of Pedagoose's hard-earned respect. Kamen had already passed away long ago. He was a child of man, and human men had comparatively short lifespans in this world. Etoff, on the other hand, was an immortal demon. She had lived significantly longer than Roxy, Sylphie, or Rudius, and her children inherited the same characteristic. Thus, Kalman's children enjoyed long lifespans. The aforementioned Kalman II was still alive and well. He wanted the world spreading knowledge of the North God style. Yeah, I do like this story, though, because, again, this kind of gets in the idea of how the stories are told sort of gives significance to the individual. And typically, if you're going to tell some sort of epic tale that will sell to people, that will entertain people, again, you having a musician that is singing a song in a bar or whatever, they're going to sing about how this dude summoned a floating fortress, dude. That's insane. Not, he goes over here and beats Etoff and marries her. I mean, you could spin that into some weird romantic thing, but again, we're talking about a demon here. Nobody wants to sing about a guy marrying a demon. That's not gonna fly for a lot of regions. But no, a guy that summons a fortress and destroys a demon god, yeah, that's a lot more interesting to people. So I do like that idea. The idea of how history itself is wrote, and fairy tales can sort of make certain people a lot more popular. Even though, again, I recognize right here and agree, the idea that he literally, the remnants, these groups are still fighting. Even though Laplace is dead, these armies are still moving. They're still doing their own thing. They're still causing havoc. He comes in, puts an end to it. He kind of wraps it up. By himself, wraps it up. And yet nobody talks about him. It's kind of sad. The name Kalman didn't end with him either, for there was the North God Kalman III. He was also known as Alexander Ryback. He was a son of the second generation head and had only recently inherited the name. Still, being a very young swordsman, unlike with the sword god, there was no rule in the North God style saying only one could hold the title of North God at a time. Thus, two currently held the title. That's interesting. I don't think they've mentioned that before, but I kind of assumed that was going to be the case for all of them. That, yeah, only one person can have it. I mean, because even with the case of, like, the Water God style, is like it kind of implied the idea there was, like, a couple of the people that were just as powerful as her, but she had this one unique, unbeatable skill. And so nobody ever tried. They were really incredible, but they never tried. She was super old, but she had this ability that nobody's going to mess with it. But here it's saying, yes, the North God, I mean, that makes sense too with the North God style. These people are always kind of seen as very eccentric, very weird. So why would they not be different? A style that is around the idea of not having rules or conventions, it makes sense that they wouldn't have a role like that. The second generation head was semi-retired at the moment. Kalman III was the one listed amongst the 7 great powers. That's a very good distinction there, though. But how would you know that? How would you know that, though? That's a curious question mark. How would you know that? Unless they seen Kalman III specifically beat one of the 7 great powers and then it moved. But I think he's towards the bottom. Yeah, he's a 7th, so I don't know how they could tell. Who said that? How would you know? And he was the one researching fighting styles that use other types of weapons besides swords. Very interesting. According to Orsted, North God Kalman III was a likely candidate to be Man God's disciple. I guess Orsted probably could have told him that that's a third. With that in mind, he was Ruius' next target to locate. Too late. It's too late. Ruius was hoping to add the man to the roster before he joined the Man God. It was his duty to dispose of him. Judging by what Orsted said, Kalman III was likely in the conflict zone. He was also, without a doubt, more powerful than Rudius. He'd need to be careful to assess the situation to confirm whether he was an enemy, and to discover a foolproof plan for defeating him if that was the case. Yeah. Rudius brought Eris once more. They set out for the conflict zone, an unsettling name, a place dotted with countries, settlements, and tribes that couldn't be classified as sovereign nations. All of them were locked in a never-ending warfare with one another. It was like this world's version of Japan's warring state periods. Looking back in history by 400 years, and this place was caught in the final throes of the Laplace War. The Austria Kingdom was the only realm that managed to escape destruction and retain its territories. The central and southern regions, where the soil wasn't as rich, hadn't belonged to anyone at the time. The hopefuls who had survived and wanted to rest flooded to these unclaimed areas to set up countries of their own, desiring to turn the area into bountiful lands of their own. For a while, there was no strife between them, but as each gained more power and borders became established, they clashed. The situation changed. It began with small skirmishes that ballooned, pulling in every nearby nation. This was the opening act to the period of conflict. The King Dragon Realm was the first nation to extricate itself from the chaos of war in that period. Its capital was planted in the bowels of the continent's southern region, a less ideal location. Real estate value aside, its borders encroached on the lair of the King Dragons from which it got its name. The King Dragon Realm formed an execution squad to drive the King Dragons out and successfully claimed the mountain where they resided. This allowed the realm to get its hands on mineral resources, and in that instant, they became the strongest of the countries in the southern region. This is all really interesting stuff. And again, this is kind of one of those cases of like it sprinkles a lot of this information here and there, but this is where it's tying it all together. I love this stuff. But it is interesting that they talk about the idea of driving the King Dragons out. I assume the King Dragons were still there. So my assumption here is they've driven most of them away so they can actually, solidify themselves there. But there's still King Dragons in those mountains. It's just they're not right there. They sort of have a parameter they've kind of established here. But yeah, all this stuff kind of makes sense. The idea of like the Laplace War happens. There's this big surge of the war. The army's coming in. It's just destroying everything in its wake. And the Asura Kingdom obviously was the last remaining spot. Like this is the last remaining hope. And they finally defeat them. And so now that the demon army's gone now, suddenly everybody's like, okay, let's make this our territory, here our territory. Let's make this our territory. And then so the King Dragon Realm, they come over here and they establish themselves here. And then up here, chaos is still going on. There hasn't been a solidification of who owns this area. The King Dragon Realm hoped to use that momentum to claim the territories in the south and began invading its neighbors. They occupied a number of countries along the coast, claimed Sanakia, Kika, and Sharon as vassal states. Using Sharon as its foothold, they were poised to move on the conflict zone and conquer the entire area to add it to its expansive territory. Their plans were thwarted by two countries who intervened: the Asura Kingdom and the Holy Kingdom of Milis. They pressured the King Dragon Realm, warning them that if they invaded, Asura and Milis would not stand by and watch it happen. All three signed a pact, agreeing that they wouldn't interfere with the conflict zone. Yeah, that's not happening. Yeah, that's not happening. Yeah, sure. Sure. I'm gonna manipulate some people to fight. Can I do that? Yeah, sure. Even back here, it was happening. Ariel wasn't. This is like one of the signs of like Ariel wasn't the first one. Ariel was not the first one that was doing this meddling. And it does make sense, the idea of like other nations nearby are not going to want to see somebody get that big. And the idea that Milis, and even though Milis again is kind of overseas, they could still have fears of other countries getting more powerful. They're not going to want to see this one kingdom getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because that's just meaning it's a growing threat. Let's slap it down now. We got to keep them in check. Each of these three powers desperately wanted the land and the central continent, of course. Each desperately came up with the same idea. They would pull strings of a chosen ruler of the region. Someday, one of the countries would unite the conflict zone, and their chosen champion sat at the helm. They would make that country their vassal state. What followed was chaos and war. Each kingdom sent their own spies into the conflict zone, where they would infiltrate the ranks of whichever nation was gaining power, and make the move to unify the region. Their attempts to hamstring one another would inevitably catapult the promising nation into civil war, causing it to collapse. The territory would either fracture or be invaded and destroyed by its neighbors, sending the dream of unified region up in smoke. Yeah, this is where it's like, yeah, this is nasty. Everything that's happening in this conflict zone is nasty. And everything these other nations are doing is nasty. They're literally just playing with people's lives. These people are just constantly just killing each other, constantly turning on each other, constantly conflict with each other. All these civilians are being caught in the middle of it all. This is nasty stuff. But reality, this happens. This happens in the real world. None of the three nations involved from the outside really minded this. The conflict zone provided import and export industry for military equipment. So even if they couldn't unify the region and take control, it was no great loss. It was just one more place with a potentially promising future for them to send spies. The conflict zone was a site of a great Cold War, while publicly, all three secretly puppeteered. Yep. During the displacement incident, Philip and Hilda had found themselves transported there. They were mistaken for spies and died after torture. It made sense in the context of history of the place. Rhys would have to be careful. He already laid the groundwork ahead of time with Milis' blessed child and received passage permit from Milis' missionary knights. With this, he could easily slip through each country's borders. Again, we're going back to this whole idea that, like, I figure what happened is after everything that happened with Rudius in Milis, I'm guessing the blessed child stepped up. This is the second time they've implied the idea that the blessed child has stepped up. She's no longer just a tool that they pull out of the closet every now and then and aim it at somebody and put it back in there. She's probably still a caged bird, but she probably is stepping up more and has a lot more power than she had before, which is very interesting. He received a passage permit. With this, he could easily slip through each country's border. Few were foolish enough to pick a fight with Milis's overseas expeditionary forces. But Rudius wouldn't let his guard down. If someone claimed his permit was counterfeit, people would likely believe them, regardless of the truth. It was all too common for outsiders to be puppets of foreign powers. They'd dispose of Rudius in an instant. Yeah, that's the fear, though. Like, they can claim somebody's a counterfeit, but at the same time, that puts their life in danger. Because what if they claim it's a counterfeit, and they're not of the Milis, missionary knights? They claim it's a counterfeit, they harm that person, and it actually ends up being true. That puts them under threat. The backing power of Asra and Milis in the conflict zone wasn't surefire like it was elsewhere. That was why Rudius decided to pass himself off as a simple adventurer. Edis and Rudius made their two-man squad, an A-ranked duo who came to dive labyrinths. That was their cover story. North God Kalman III was also an adventurer, from what Rudius understood. A perfect excuse to make contact with him. They set off for Gardenia Kingdom's town of Gide, a beautiful place with fertile soil. The architecture was far more primitive than what you would find in either Asra or the King Dragon realm. The town lacked underground sewer system, so the smell hung heavy in the streets. The town folks milled around with dead looks in their eyes. A group of men with unusually heavy armor kept watch on their guard routes. It wasn't somewhere Rudius wanted to stay for long. Yeah, I mean, somewhere that's in a conflict like this, and they're going to get in here in a minute, that they're kind of getting a little bit rough. Yeah. I wouldn't want to be there either. Orsa said that North God Kalman III kept a headquarters around this area at the moment. Reese was curious why he chose such a dangerous place. The man aspired to be a hero. Maybe he enjoyed staying in such a volatile place where violence tended to happen. He wanted to be a hero. Want to go to violent places. He was already famous amongst adventurers. There were few in the world who counted amongst SS rank, and he was one. That was the pinnacle of the Adventurers Guild. Despite success, Kalman III didn't have the humility of a master. He boasted and stuck his nose where it didn't belong. Like a protagonist of a light novel or something. Are we hinting at something? No. Thankfully, that meant it ought to be fairly easy to get info on him if he visited the Adventure Guild. If he boasted a lot, we might actually get info pretty easily. Kitty's Adventure Guild was a tired and shabby place, building itself old, filthy, and had signs of repair throughout. It made no attempt to varnish the fact that it sat in the center of war and death. That's why I'm saying we should get a move on now. Oh, we still got a chance. Entering, a woman's voice boomed around them. It was uncannily familiar. Reese was sure that he had forgotten it, but Reese immediately felt nostalgia. Yes, that's right. That's what she sounded like. This was more laid back than he recalled her being, and despite her shouting, there was still something more rational about the way that she spoke. There's no way. The front lines are too close. We'll get swept up in it. But you understand the reality, don't you? Following the voice, Reese found a familiar face to match. Her blonde hair had grown to her shoulders, and she was a little taller too, or perhaps the same height. Her face looked more mature. She had become an adult woman. Her attire looked more expensive and practical, but armor covered in scratches. Bow and quiver, a rare weapon for any adventurer to choose, hung on her back. At first, Reese thought it was the same primitive one that she used in the past, but it was actually a very impressive composite bow. At their first meet, she was a fledgling who maintained a brusque facade so that no one would speak down to her. On a second meet in Shariah, she accepted a job as Ariel's bodyguard. The two of them just happened to bump into each other. Back then, she seemed like the backbone of her party. If we move right now, the army's definitely going to find us at the border. Whether that's Gardenia's army or Nakrina's, the outcome is the same. I shouldn't have to spell it out to you. You know what'll happen to us, don't you? But if we don't move, then Nakrina's army's going to storm the town. Or maybe not. Same could be said about making a move now. They might not find us either. The woman looked more like a veteran after all this time. She was trading opinions with a woman that may be her party leader. Her words sound argumentative, but her voice was too steady for it to be a serious fight. The other people around them, probably party members, didn't seem as overconfident, but they weren't deathly pale and overcome with despair either. Just calmly listening, assessing the circumstances, and awaiting their leader's decision. Reese had seen a party like this once before. S-rank party, discussing things before a labyrinth. Perhaps the fangs of the Black Wolf had been the same way. Not that Paul was anywhere near as laid back as the members of this party. Gonna bring back Paul. Parties that reached S rank weren't anything like those cobbled together haphazardly. These people had a choice, and they forged a sense of solidarity. Showing how much they growed. Because it kind of implied the idea of back there with them hiring their party, the Amazons, was this idea that they just wanted an all-female party to help them with that, because they didn't want men around her. The men were going to be more, crude or whatever. So not necessarily kind of implying the idea that they were incredibly skilled. They were skilled, but they weren't like incredibly skilled. This isn't like an S-rank party or anything like that. So it's kind of cool to see that they've grown a lot over the time. Lost in thought. One of the members turned their gaze to Rudius, twirling a strand of hair in her fingers. Rudius was pretty sure this was Elisa, the girl who was pretty attached to Roxy. The Yuri girl. It was hard to forget someone who liked Roxy that much. She was about 15 years old when Rudius first met her. If you recall correctly, she called all the members of her party elder sister. There was nothing childish about her anymore. She too had a veteran air about her, even as she simply sat in a chair. No longer was her clothing youthful and cutesy. She was a seasoned mage. If you stood the two of them side by side and asked which one was more reliable, she'd probably be the safer bet. It had been 5 years at this point. "It's Sarah's old fling," Alicia blurted out. Her abrupt explanation jolted the other women to look at Rudius. Rudius was used to these glares, probably due to getting plenty of them from his wives a few times a day. This went doubled for the one immediately behind him, who was standing in her usual pose. He didn't want Eris staring daggers at him. He wasn't the same man he's used to be back then. They didn't even go all the way. Because you couldn't, unfortunately. Rudius? During the years he was afflicted with ED, there was an archer in an adventure party that looked after him. Her name was Sarah. The one that got away. Pikachu, the one that got away. This kind of puts salt on the wound coming back to Sarah like this and how much it seems like she likes him. And obviously kind of shows that him being around her, I think sort of triggers something in her. Sucks. It sucks. It's been a while. Yes, to this woman, he was the one that got away. Nope, she was the one that got away. Yes, to her, same. To us, it's her. To her, it's him. Sarah and her party, the Amazons, had come to the town, having accepted a request from a mission board. It was simple. Bring a letter. Pretty common request for the Adventurers Guild. The rank associated with it would change depending on the distance and difficulty, but in general, the reward was measly. Sarah's party had lucked out. This was an impressive reward that paid half up front. She and the other woman hesitated because it was in the conflict zone, but they were short on cash, so they took it. It turned out to be simple as a hope. 5 days traveling to deliver a missive successfully. What happened afterwards caught them off guard. Just as Sarah and them began to leave, the war between Gardenia and Nakrina heated up. The borders were sealed off for travel, and Sarah and her companions were trapped. A country at war wasn't a great place to be stuck at as an adventurer. Public safety plummeted, fewer missions posted, and adventurers in the area were practically conscribed by the guild to act as mercenaries. Pay wasn't half bad, but the fatality rate was ridiculous. No adventurer would willingly partake in such work, except those who did it routinely. Yeah, I can see that being, that's an obvious thing there, that the adventurer got. Now, what's actually more interesting about this whole situation here is the idea that the Adventurer Guild itself, you would assume, would be sort of like a corporation. And the idea of the Adventurer Guild itself in one location, you know, turning adventurers into mercenaries to fight for that location seems counter to the fact that just nearby in another country, they're going to have an Adventurer Guild there, which is sending them to attack their own people. So it's almost like the sides themselves are fighting each other. The guilds themselves, even though the guilds are supposed to be all one. That's an oddity there, but it makes sense. Like it's odd, but it makes sense at the same time. Why wouldn't, one, you take advantage of the war itself, but two, protect yourself in like a almost separate entity? Unless the guilds themselves pick their winners, which I don't think they really get into details on that. But again, it also makes sense in the idea that the locals are going to be posting to request aid in the fight itself. And thus, the guild itself is getting requests. Are they going to turn it away? The Amazons were a veteran party, but weren't killers. They were eager to get out of Dodge quickly as possible. There was one problem. Forcibly bypassing the border risked one of the two armies finding them. Adventurers were veritable treasure troves of information. A party of only women, if caught by either side, it was easy to imagine what would happen to them afterwards. Yep. Torture and worse. So there you have it. Damned if we go, damned if we don't, Sarah said with a shrug. She was acting as second in command for her party. One of their leaders had been killed since he last saw them. Sarah had been the most veteran member at the time, which is how she landed in her current position. Yeah, I think they even named that particular person, but I forget who it was, but that kind of sucks. That had to suck for Sarah. It was heartrending to lose a party member and a comrade, but being an adventurer meant walking the thin line between life and death. Currently, Sarah and her friends were in a serious bind. Reese wasn't against helping them. If he turned a blind eye due to his own work, he wouldn't be able to live with himself. If something bad happened and he heard about it later, it would tear a deep, dark void inside of him. I think I can help you out. Keep this on the lowdown, but I have a passage permit from Millis. It can get you across the border if that's what you need. Their faces lit up at the offer. You sure? We don't exactly have that much money at the moment, so we can't really repay you for helping us. I don't need your coin anyways. You can repay me in another way. Reese flashed a mischievous smile at them. Their faces instantly hardened. Even Sarah was giving an intimidating look. However, her grimace crumbled and gave way to a strained smile. Fine, but there's a lot of girls in our party who've got a real hatred for men. So make do with me, okay? Though, who knows if you'll be able to get it up for me. There's so much ow in this statement, it's not funny. The idea that these girls probably don't have much of a like for men, which I think they implied that with the first time he met them. But, like, one, she offered, Rudius, she offered, but two, she doesn't think it's going to work. And it actually does get into that, which is kind of interesting, which is kind of a surprise for me. No, that wasn't what I meant. I want information, okay? Why are y'all looking at me like that? His mischievous smile had been more of a leer, it seems, and here he thought he'd gotten better at it. No, your smiles and everything suck, and they will always suck, Rudius. I don't know why you haven't figured that out by now. I got 3 loving wives, thank you. I don't need more women. Oh, too bad. I was thinking we could finally have a do-over that day. With Sarah's tease, it seemed like she was the only one that understand it was a joke. Not that he'd intended it as a joke. Don't tease me like that. At least not in front of my wife, right, Eris? Glancing back, Eris grunted in her usual pose. Reese won't even touch my breast right now. There's no way that he meant it that way. This was trust gained by being an all-round decent guy. Eris was exactly right. He wasn't short on willing women. If he needed, he could wait until bedtime, fill up Eris all he wanted, and then wake up the next morning refreshed. But she may lose faith in him once again. You're not supposed to be doing anything of that stuff. After hitting Eris, the women looked relieved. That settled one problem, but then another one cropped up. Sarah's face grew dark. Eris? Yeah, I for some reason completely forgot about this when I got to this part. I'm like, oh, that's right. That's right. Like, he even was pretty clear to what happened back when they met the second time. Because she didn't know about the first time. I mean, Adis, whatever, the other lady at the brothel, she kind of explained a little bit, but he gave her the full picture later on. What? Edis as the woman that abandoned Rudius? I didn't abandon him. Oh, yeah? Reese said that you did, though. I guess he forgave you for it and let you marry him then. That hostility was obvious enough that both Edis and Rudius picked up on it. Sad as like, girl, you hurt my boy. You hurt my boy. Edis's face scrunched, annoyed with hostility. This really wasn't good. Reese wanted Sarah to knock it off. This was one person she didn't want to pick a fight with. Edis wouldn't let her play it off as a joke. It's often the case where if somebody hurts somebody, you don't really care that they can beat you up. It doesn't stop you from getting pissed off. And it's obvious at this point that she cares for him. Sarah, drop it. Bickering with the wife isn't how you win the man back, Elisa said with a teasing tone. No, that's not what I'm after. The group gave a light chuckle, breaking the tension. So, Sarah, about that whole thing, there's some pretty delicate circumstances involved. The two of us had a sort of misunderstanding. Or, to be more precise, I got the wrong idea. Yeah, I figured. If there weren't some extenuating circumstances, your other scary bodyguard wife would never have gone back to you. Other scary wife? She must mean Sylphie. She had a point there. Sylphie had forgiven him for marrying another woman, but she was also very picky about who she'd accept in the family. She had allowed Roxy and Edis, but whatever rigid criteria she had ruled Nanahoshi out. The worst criteria ever. Sylphie just doesn't understand how great Nanahoshi is. Actually, no, again, I still, to this day, stand by the idea that I think she fears how good Nanahoshi is. Again, Rudius and her have a special connection, and she's seen that. This Nanahoshi is somehow has something special with my guy, and I don't like that. It's a jealousy thing. Reese was equally remorseful for how he handled things, but grateful for her graciousness through the situation. Well, I'll let you fill me out on the details later. Now, what info are you wanting? Back to business. The whole situation had Rudius' stomach to knots. He hoped it wouldn't come up again. She's like, yeah, we'll talk about it late. No, I don't want to talk about it. We'll talk about it. No, I don't want to talk about it later. No, that's all right. Right. See, I'm actually looking for the North God Kalman at the moment. We heard that he's using this area as his base of operations. North God Kalman? An unfamiliar girl leapt to her feet. She looked about 18, chestnut brown hair, and energetic air about her. She had a sword at her hip, suggesting that she was a swordswoman or warrior. She wasn't part of the Amazons the last he saw them. Oh, I know about him. I'm a big fan. So you are. He was in this area about 3 years ago. I heard rumors that he moved to Hammerpoa. 3 years was old info for someone who considered themselves a fan. But that's how it goes. Unlike his previous world, this world didn't have internet to track your favorite celebs. Hammerpoa is the Marquet mercenary country. That's directly south of here. Oh, can you believe it? That's exactly the opposite direction of the Nakarina Kingdom. And we just happened to want to cross the border and head to the safer southern region. This is practically a godsend, isn't it? Don't you think? Mr. Sub Leader's old fling? Oh, this is so great. What do you think the same thing? Old fling person? She was awfully glib. Not that Rias minded. It reminded him of Aisha, actually. He was worried that she wasn't a fan of North God Kalman at all and was feeding him a lure. He just have to verify her info. Even if we were to go to completely opposite directions of where you guys were going, I still plan to see you off. Really? I guess I should have expected such compassion from the sub-leader's former fling. You're a real peach. Wish we could swap you for Sarah. She's got a real tummy pooch. Rias wandered instinctively to Sarah's stomach when she promptly hit her with her arms. It's not a pooch. Her voice was menacing. Rias almost ducked behind Eris in fear. She was a little thicker, but he wasn't in a position to judge based on his previous self. Anyways, how about we start heading for Hammerpoa then? With that, they headed out to bypass the country's border. This is where we get some good stuff right here. They got through the border uneventfully. Rias thought they'd get grilled about how regular adventurers got passage permits. Rias even had a plausible excuse in case, but the guards merely glanced at the pass, faces drawn in displeasure, and let them through. They're like, we don't want to mess with Millis people. Go. Just go. There's almost a sense here that they wouldn't even bother scrutinizing it all. Like, it would be a better option to let them through and possibly get fooled by a counterfeit. Now, I think they would do something eventually if, like, a whole bunch of them started coming through. Like, oh, yeah, we're seeing way too many of these. They got to be not real. Get the Millis people out here. But for, like, a random person, a random group, just every now and then somebody shows up and has one, let them through. Because what are the chances that you stop it and you scrutinize them and they actually turn out to be real? Yeah, that puts some heat on you that you don't really care for. And yes, there's no shortage of depicting border people in this series where they just don't want to get involved with things. Same faces the Amazons pulled at him earlier, strangely. You didn't steal that or anything, did you? You sure we won't get in trouble for this? It's fine. We won't get in trouble. To get such skepticism meant the past was a bigger deal than Rias had realized. Everyone knew what consequences awaited someone who claimed fraudulent association with Millis' missionary knights. Yeah, exactly. Rias' future self detailed how the church killed off Zenoba and Aisha. And it is one of those moments where I read this and I go, am I misremembering? Again, I might be misremembering, and you guys could yell at me in the chat. I'm sure you are in a minute. Julie? Ginger? Like, we have more people here, just Zenoba and Aisha, which, yes, technically, probably in the hierarchy of importance in Rudius's mind, it's going to be Aisha, Zenoba, Julie, Ginger. That would be my assumption for Rudius's tier list for that importance. And it doesn't make that any less here that he doesn't mention him, but it's still, like, when I read this, I'm like, wait, Julie and Ginger was there too, right? Why are we not mentioning them too? Yeah. And technically, the only one that was actually the target of the church was Zenoba. That was the target, because Aisha wasn't involved with that whole situation. Julie wasn't. Ginger wasn't. Their target was Zenoba. But it's just the sad thing is they were also targeting Rudius, and I don't think that they would mind, let's just kill everybody involved around Rudius as well, which is going to include them. So, sucks. So Rudius had an idea how fearsome enemies they could be. They obtained it through the Blessed Child and Millis, though. He wasn't worried. The Blessed Child's, like, massive connection. It's like massive connection for him. You adventurers there, stop. As they made their way along the road, a voice called out to them. There was 3 horses heading straight for them from the border. Thankfully, it wasn't the horse that spoke. They weren't Nokopara. Stop there, adventurers. It was the night. As they caught up, they glared down at them. They were clad in silver armor, inscribed with the holy country of Millis' national flag. Missionary knights. Dun dun. Dun 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 dun. Dun dun dun. The moment the Amazons realized who they were, they went pale, frantically whispering. Sarah crept her hand towards her sword. Eris dropped into battle stance, and Rudius put his arm up to stop them. Is there a problem? We have received a report of a group of people holding passage permits from Millis. Are we correct in assuming you are that party? Yes, that would be us. We have received no contact information from top informing us of your party. We will need to inspect your permit. It had been only an hour since they used the passage permit. This was a little fast. Were mission knights everywhere? Scary. I mean, I'd assume unless somebody kind of tips somebody off, I can see that being the case. I mean, I already kind of had a little bit of a hint of feeling that possibly geese could be in the area. I mean, they already mentioned the idea that there's a possibility, there's a hint here. There's a good chance that Geese, through communication with the man god, could have set up to have this entire mission given to the Amazons, and they knew that Rios was going to be there and that he would help them get out of there. And yeah, they could have tipped them off right here, trying to get them involved as well. I think there's a really high likely chance that this mission for the Amazons was Geese's doing. The idea of just sending a missive into the town and paying a whole bunch for it. Now, it could be the work of one of the other countries that made that missive to be sent in there to give them information. And that's why it paid a whole bunch, is because they knew that they'd be sending somebody into an area that is going to get locked in war in here in a minute. So they could just, without knowing, doing the work of somebody delivering a message about the war and whatnot, knowing full well what was coming. But it still could be Geese. Now, this whole thing with the missionary sites, I think it's the fact that they're everywhere. Yeah. Perfectly understandable. Please, have a look. Showing the permit, one knight snatched it and scrutinized it. He quickly lifted his visor in shock, then glanced to Ruiz's face, whispering to one of his comrades. His compatriot produced a beginner wand, which he used to prod the permit. The jewel capping it gave off a pale glow. The men traded glances, nodded, and dismounted their horses. Afterwards, they immediately knelt in front of him. There's a lot of power in those words. There's a lot of power in that seal. Ruiz has got himself a I win card right now. Just flaunt that around. He's got power. He literally is carrying around a crown. That permit is literally a crown. He's a king. The man who took the permit reverently offered it back, cupping it in his hands. Our sincerest apologies for such impotence. We had no idea you were the Lady Blessed Child's envoy. No, not at all. Thank you, men, for your diligent work. Thank goodness they were clear. Reese retrieved the permit. To his eyes, all he could see was a number of Mills emblems on the permit, but apparently something indicated that they were from the Blessed Child. He could guess that they did a routine counterfeit check. It was a strange feeling, having a group of highly distinguished knights taking a knee for him like this. Again, that's the strength of that. Again, they implied, again, the idea that this Blessed Child is literally Mills himself. Like, it's literally that high up there. Or at least for Dustbin. Or at least for Dustbin. I must ask, however, what brings Her Holiness's envoy out to these parts? I'm searching for someone. Might we ask who? North God Kalman. Do you know of him? The knight nodded. Yes, but the North God is no longer in this area. We have heard rumors that he had left quite a while ago for Hammerpoa. It seems that he recently left that area as well, so his current whereabouts are unknown. I'm also searching for a demon whose face is like a monkey. Guy named Geese. A demon folk? To what end? The knight's eyes gleamed with enmity, sending a chill down Reese's spine. I just totally had a mental image of this guy's like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have no reports of it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. A demon? Can we kill it? Like, it just suddenly becomes bloodthirsty. Well, he's my enemy. I want to know where he is so I can defeat him. Aha. So that is your aim. I am unaware of this man's name, but a demon with a monkey's face has been spotted recently in Hammerpoa. Why is he here is a question mark. Because again, he already supposedly ran to the North God, way over there in Begaret. What is he doing here? If not to set up an ambush. Is this it? Is this the place? Did he know he was coming here and he's setting up things? And again, that would put it in line with Sarah sort of getting involved with him and wanting to get out and coming down this direction. And yes, I understand the idea that seems like it's a bit much. Why would you have Sarah do this when he could just he can just plant some information about going down this direction? But this goes into that whole idea of his destiny and almost having to manipulate things in a certain way. And yes, having somebody like Sarah being in need of help would help deviate his path. That was helpful information. Then again, Ruiz didn't think Geese would be that easy to locate. It could be someone else. There was still a possibility that they would bump into him by sheer coincidence. He was probably moving pieces on the board, same as Ruiz. Should you require it, we could send our fastest rider to apprehend him. Ruiz considered it. If Geese realized Ruiz sent him, he would probably try to escape. How many missionary knights do you have at your disposal? In Hammerpoa? 10. I see. Please capture the man. Yes, sir. The leader jerked his chin, giving a signal to the knights beside him. Having orders, the man mounted and raced off ahead of them. Ruiz felt bad asking them to do this, as it was an official church business. Well then, we'll be returning to our mission then. Of course, thank you so much. Certainly, sir. Though, while I realize it's improper for me to bring this up, if you are a follower of Millis, I question how appropriate it is for you to be traveling with so many women like this. Oh, from outsider, it probably looked like he was dragging around a harem. He'd only touched one woman in this bunch, but he also wasn't a follower, but he wouldn't admit that. Yeah, let's just keep that information to yourself. I have merely hired these women as bodyguards. I wouldn't assume otherwise. However, if neither party is inclined to engage in intimate relations, then their sex shouldn't matter, should it? And for those who are so inclined, being of the same sex would not necessarily stop them from partaking in such acts either. Or am I mistaken? Yes, as you say, sir. My humblest apologies. So wrong. I'm just surprised this guy's bold enough to even ask this of Rudius. Again, he chased them down, gets this permit. The permit says that he is, like, literally the blessed child's envoy. They bowed to him and apologized and held up the permit like, here you go, sir. This is from the blessed child. Like, the blessed child touched this. Let me give it back to you. I am unworthy. And yet he's willing to question him like this. Dude, bold. Could be an aspect of it, him saying, sir, you realize this is not good, that you're doing what you're doing. It could look really bad to... I think it would probably be more of a thing of him bringing this up because it would make it... Rudius doing this, if he's doing something improper, would look bad upon the blessed child. You're an envoy of the blessed child. Be careful, you're going to make her look bad. And I'm willing to say something to you, even if it might get me in trouble and harmed. I want to protect the name of the blessed child. I can see that more. But yeah, true point here. I can have like a whole group of guys with me, and it doesn't mean that we're not banging in the corner. There were many men in Ostra Kingdom who were gay after all. Beautiful men who surrounded themselves with those of the same sex to form a harem. So really, the gender of the party didn't matter. Fortunately, Millis wasn't so closed-minded as to forbid homosexuality. Harems were a total no-go, though, for any sex orientation. At least they were egalitarian about it. That was interesting. I don't think they've ever mentioned this before. Very interesting that they actually are fine with homosexuality. Which, I mean, nothing has stated so far they were against it. It's just kind of interesting. Typically with a lot of settings like this, with like a church or something like that, they're more quickly to open up themselves to harems before homosexuality. Because at least with a harem, you're still able to produce offspring and whatnot. You're still able to multiply. Whereas homosexuality, that could prevent that unless you get a mistress or somebody to, impregnate off the side or whatever. You're fine with doing that in order to multiply. Very interesting. Please, excuse us. The knights mounted their horses and left, looking surprisingly pleasant with the answer. Reus was glad that he managed to dodge further trouble. At least, if they did later discover that he wasn't a follower of Millis, he hadn't lied to them about that. This shouldn't cause any problems down the line, he hoped. He's like, yeah, I don't want to cause any problem for the blessed child, and I'm not going to get a permit next time. But the guy's like, yeah, I tested him. Everything's good. He's not, again, he won't make the blessed child look bad. I think this guy's only asking this, and he's pleased with the answer because he doesn't want Reus to make the blessed child look bad. What? Reus asked, noticing the look that Sarah was giving him. Nothing, just, it was real after all. What, you thought I would use a counterfeit and expose everyone to danger? She shrugged. I mean, it's not something people can get their hands on easily. Well, I'm in that line of work where it's typical. The Oyster Corporation was nothing if not focused on the future. Thus, to protect the well-being of his employees, the CEO had impressive connections. That you established? Yeah, guess you've moved up in the world since I last met you. You're a real big shot. Reese didn't think that he was a big shot, honestly. Yeah, downplay yourself some more. That evening, they made camp on the roadside, made 2 bonfires, and assigned a guard to each. This is something the Amazons did habitually. Given Sarah mentioned that some of the girls really hated men, it was an attempt to get distance from Rudius as they slept. He wasn't bothered by it. Ed just slept beside him. That was more than enough. If he got truly desperate, he had his memento from Roxy in his pocket as well. It wasn't as though he trusted all the members of the Amazons either. There was a possibility a disciple of the man god was amongst them. For that reason, Rudius and Eris were taking turns on lookout. Eris planted herself on the ground, back against a tree, sword in arms as she slept. Reserve used to sleep like that, in the same cool, heroic pose. Reese wondered when she picked up that habit. Her face was surprisingly relaxed as she slept. Reese was used to seeing her disciplined expression even when she was fast asleep. But for some reason, she was all smiles tonight. Maybe she was having a really good dream. The Eris he knew now was standoffish and didn't really share her emotions. But at her core, she was no different from before. As heartening as it was to see her mature, it was also a bit sad too. This is a really weird statement right here. Kind of knows in the idea that she's picked up this habit, laying there sleeping just like Reserve did. Really cool. Really cool little nod there to Reserve. Really want to see Reserve. Please. We need Reserve to show up. Damn it. Hopefully we'll see him in the conflict zone. That'd be cool. But no, he's saying right here, he was used to seeing her disciplined expression when she was fast asleep, even when she was fast asleep. But for right now, she was all smiles. It could be the idea that she's having a really pleasant dream. It could be even the idea that I'm wondering if she's possibly happy because she's going on an adventure with Rudius, going out here, just super excited. We're in the conflict zone. There's a good chance we're getting a fight. She's really happy about this whole situation. And again, she's got Rudius all to herself, but she's traveled with him alone all the time. He would know that this is whenever we're alone. But he says the Eris that he knows now is standoffish and didn't really share her emotions. Very interesting thing to note there. I guess it technically makes sense, the idea that she was doing this technically back when they were traveling together because she didn't want to cause problems. So she was trying to bottle up her emotions and not cause problems and not have outbursts. And so I feel like she's been doing this for quite a while. But I guess right now he's kind of more pointing out the idea that she's become more mature, so she's able to keep her stuff kind of bottled up. She knows that it's going to cause problems. She's grown up. She's gotten better. She's keeping that stuff locked away. Whereas before, she was a little bit more easier to set off. So... But as the idea that she's more standoffish now, that kind of makes me wonder what that is pointing out. Because that does sort of show a sign that there's kind of a negative aspect there. That kind of concerns me a little bit. But at least he's knowing the idea here that she's matured a lot. But it was a bit sad too. Almost like this is something that he liked. I kind of missed that old side of her, which is kind of funny. Like you get, how many volumes and chapters have we had where he's with Eris and he's like, this girl, calm the F down. Girl, you're going to cause a problem. Stop it. Girl, chill out. Down, girl. Down, girl. Now suddenly it's like, I kind of miss that. I kind of miss the old violent, crazy girl. I was nearing time to stand watch. He almost didn't have a heart to wake her. You're doing a good job staying wait. Sarah plopped down beside him, 2 mugs in her hand. She held out one to Rudius, grunting as if it was enough for him to understand to take it. Rudius accepted it. The liquid smell burned his nostrils. What is this exactly? At least a special soup to ward off drowsiness. I'll gladly take some then. He suspected it might be poisoned, but he couldn't perform detoxification in front of Sarah. She'd be really disgusted with him if he did that. Instead, he sipped it gingerly and tested it. 1 drop was enough for the savory flavor to spread throughout his mouth. It was only after he swallowed that a belated tingling sensation lingered. He had imagined it fiery hot, but it wasn't all that spicy. Seconds later, he felt the warm sensation in his stomach and throat, like a gentle burn of ginger tea. It's delicious, right? Sarah grinned and sipped her soup as well. She was sitting awfully close. If they leaned ever so slightly closer, their shoulders might brush against one another. It's like, dude, chill. It's like no matter how old Rudius gets, no matter how much experience Rudius has, this dude still acts like a virgin. This dude still acts like a virgin. No matter how many times he's banged Eris, no matter how many times he's banged Sylphie, no matter how many times he's banged Roxy, he still acts like a virgin. Nah, he was probably being too self-conscious. Say, Rudius, what are you doing right now? What do you mean? Currently, he was experiencing heart palpitations sitting super close to a girl. He had to get it together. 3 wives already. He fully understood how inappropriate it would be for him to commit adultery. He fully understands because he's experienced it so many times. He's a veteran at adultery. He fully understands how inappropriate it is because I've done it so many damn times. He was keeping a vow of celibacy at the moment. Could anyone blame him for getting flustered over a beautiful woman sitting so close? He shoved his hand into his pocket, squeezing the fabric inside and praying to God. I mean, I figured you were still in Shariah, doing research with the Magician's Guild or something like that. Or that you were working as a professor, teaching people magic. Me? A professor? You were good at teaching magic, remember? I'm wondering where she's getting this. I mean, I guess it could have been from conversations they were having when they were guarding Ariel and the other girl. That's a weird comment to make. Rudius is confused. He wonders if he taught Sarah any magic. He couldn't remember. I don't remember him ever trying to teach Sarah magic. Again, I kind of assume this is probably coming up because maybe Sylphie had mentioned it or Roxy had mentioned it while they were doing their stuff with the bodyguard, but I don't think they really had much time to really have conversations like that. Roxy's over here kind of doing most of the work and kind of, again, at least the girl was like super fawning over her and about ready to have a thirst explosion on her. But I don't remember them ever talking about him being a teacher or anything. Or I figured that you were in Astra Kingdom, working as the Princess Ariel's bodyguard along with your wife. Wait, I guess she took the crown a couple years ago, huh? I wasn't in Astra for all that, so I got no idea. Yes, I did help her succeed the throne. So you did help, but it's not like you're serving directly under her or anything. I'm serving under someone else. Someone else? Dragon God Orsted. Dragon God? One of the 7 great powers? So she knew about them. That was surprising. They're not all that famous amongst the adventurers in the Rudius' experience. He nodded. That's right. I work as an underling, supporting his goals around the world. That is kind of an interesting note there. The idea that, yes, typically we have noted several times that the 7 great powers aren't that well known amongst people. Like, yes, there's like major leaders and whatnot that will know because, again, having somebody that powerful under their wing could be very beneficial to them. But for the most part, it kind of keeps hitting it over and over again, the idea that this is something that's kind of fell to the wayside. Like at some point they talked about this and they established it, but people have just forgotten about it. They don't care anymore. For Sarah to know this is pointing out right here that and technically Rudius noting it in his mind does kind of give credit to Sarah herself. That she's very learned, that she's kind of figuring this stuff out. Or has she been looking into Rudius and she's playing dumb right here just to have a conversation? That could be too. She might have been possibly looking into Rudius and found out about Orsted. So you're his servant? How in the world did you end up in a position like that? Did you submit an application or something and win him over? Like, I'll swear to be of use to you. So please make me your subordinate. Something like that. It's a long story. We've got some time. You're not going to sleep yet, are you? This girl just wants to talk to you, boy. This girl just wants to talk to you. And it's kind of funny that later on Reese notes the idea of like, he wants to talk to her again, but hopefully next time he'll learn more about her. It does kind of play this idea that right here, Sarah, even though Rudy's keeps kind of jumping this idea that he's worried about how close he is and, oh my gosh, I'm dopey. The entire time, Sarah right here just wants to connect to him. And he realizes later on that kind of turned into her really just kind of baiting information out of him. She was baiting him to talk. She was constantly just trying to pull stuff out of him. And what did that lead to? It leads to him just doing all the real talking and not him firing back at her to want to know more about her. He never really plays in the conversation, but besides feeding something back to her, which really does suck. I'm kind of missing an opportunity to really kind of make a stronger connection. Well, I guess not. Well, where to start? I'm surprised how much he tells her too, dude. I'm surprised how much, and she doesn't even flinch. That's the oddity. He gets into everything and she doesn't question a bit of it, which tells me one of two things here. One is that she trusts him and knows that he's not going to lie to her. Yeah, it could be that she's gullible, but two, it could imply the idea that she knows a bit more than she's leading on. He told her about the man god, taking advice as he traveled, telling him to check the basement, future self stopping in to tell him, he's talking about his future self coming back in time and talking to him. Again, she doesn't question any of it. His future self showing up and telling him about how he would ruin his family, man god threatening his family's safety, forcing him to confront Orsted, couldn't beat Orsted, pled for his life, pled for his family's safety. He was refused, and Eris saved him. Nearly dead, Orsted proposed he join him, and he agreed. Damn, he told her everything, dude. That kicked off my career as his secret operative. I did my best to help out Ariel on the throne in Osra, took part in a war in Shrone Kingdom, kidnapped a blessed child in Millis, and became a princess in the demon continent. It'd be great if, like, that's just, like, the only thing she questions. Like, he's talking about his self coming back from the future and talking to him and this god guy and fighting Dragon God Orsted and not dying. But no, the fact that he became a princess in the demon continent, she's like, wait, hold up, what? Explain that part? What about that geese fellow that you mentioned this afternoon? He's one of the man god's underlings. Right now I'm trying to cobble together enough offensive power to take him out. One part of that is recruiting North God Kalman. Sounds like it was a good thing for you, meeting up with Orsted. That's right. I'm sure glad to have met him. What kind of person is he? The way you talk about him, he's like a really nice guy with an open mind. Well, if I were to describe him in the most succinct way possible, Reese thought of Orsted, of when they first established their office, when they ventured out to Ostra together, when Cliff and him worked on this curse. Above all, the one thing that stood out in his memory. He's got a scary face. Sarah burst into laughter. It was true. He was kind, magnanimous, and broad-minded, but no one could deny he had a scary face. The constant in every memory was that permanent scowl. What the heck? This guy is really looking out for you, and all you can say about him is how scary his face is? I mean it. He really does. Everyone hates him because of his curse, too. Sarah must have found it hilarious. She cackled for the next few minutes, arms wrapped around her stomach. The only reason that she stifled it all was to avoid waking those sleeping nearby. That's just my face. I love my Orsted. That's my face. That's my face. I can't do anything about it. It's my face. Poor Orsted. I mean, it's true. He's just got that ugly, mean scowl all the time. Oh, man, she said at last and calmed down. The whole reason I was able to patch things up with Eris was thanks to my fight with Orsted. In a way, Sir Orsted is kind of like my own personal Cupid. Sarah quirked a brow. A Cupid? With a scary face? You got it. Sarah was racked by another fit of giggles that left her choking and coughing. Was it that funny? He didn't understand these kids and their newfangled humor. Breathing out at last, having composed herself, Sarah turned her gaze towards Rudius. Perhaps it was only the light of the bonfire dancing on her cheek, but it looked like she was blushing. Maybe she was about to admit her feelings. If she did, he'd have to let her down, suavely, like a proper man. He already had 2 wives and a husband after all. Despite cracking chokes, to ease the tension, his whole body froze up in anticipation. You sure have changed, Rudius. Even more when you were the princess's bodyguard. Her eyes misted over. She was bewitching. Rudius's breathing quickened. Beads of sweat trickled down his forehead. He shoved his hand into his pocket to clench his holy relic tight. Oh, would you look at the time? Looks like we got lost in conversation. It's about time for me to tag out for the next watch. Oh yeah, right. She immediately pulled away as Rudius breathed a big sigh of relief. For some reason, the moment the atmosphere around him shifted in the intimate direction, his whole body seized up. Lingering trauma from his failure to perform, perhaps. Someone suddenly plunked themselves on the log beside Rudius, opposite to where Sarah was a moment ago. Rudius could tell instantly who it was without even glancing her direction. He felt her gaze on him for a while now. Eris, how long have you been awake? Since you said that stuff about Orsted being Cupid, what would you think if he really had been our matchmaker? Gross. 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 That was blunt, but maybe it was a given for someone under the effects of Horse's curse. But if that's why we got together, then I guess I'd be grateful to him. She spoke reluctantly, leaning her head against his shoulder. He could feel the love. Edis? What? Typical Edis. It sounded more like a statement than a question. Let me rest my head on your lap. Fine. He placed his head atop her thighs. The stiffness he felt in his body earlier disappeared. He was no longer covered in cold sweat either. Maybe Edis had sensed that he was driven in a corner and rescued him. I'll keep watching until morning. You can sleep until then. Thanks. Her thighs were a little firm to make a good pillow, but they brought him comfort. His little man seemed to sense the danger had passed and eagerly lifted his head. Danger or not, he wasn't going to see action, so he had to behave. With that, he fell asleep. I wanted to get through all this because it kind of implies something here. First of all, with Sarah, again, I kind of get the sense of like the idea of, yeah, it felt like she was getting a little bit silly there. But again, I see Sarah as being very comfortable with Rudius. And yeah, I do kind of have a sense here that she probably was trying one last time. I think with everything that happened last time they visited, again, he technically did sort of turn her down in the second visit. And that was sort of like that hammer on the nail. But that was sort of, I think, still in the realm of her kind of having a fling with him. I think with her kind of maturing, she probably realized at this point that this is somebody that she did want. And I think right here, she was kind of willing to have this opportunity. I mean, it does imply here in a minute that she's like, you got your chance. Like, she literally says right there, right here, she was literally saying, if you want it, come get it, Rudius. Like, I'm ready for it if you want it. Like, she was opening the door for him. He didn't take it. She probably sensed some little bit of daggers hitting her back, and she's like, oh, look at the time. Looks like I gotta go change. But again, that was literally her saying, she's trying one last time. So I kind of wonder if she was being overly goofy and silly right here for the sake of sort of trying to look cute and get with him right here, establishing a connection. But I think there is sort of an element of her having a lot of comfort with Rudius. I think there's a lot of comfort right here with her and Rudius. And she probably doesn't have much experience hanging around people much and really making bonds with other men because her party's always this group of women. So I can see her having sort of familiarity and trust and comfort with Rudius that she does not have with really anybody else. So she's probably going to really enjoy this time right here. And thus, yeah, get a little bit silly right here with him. But yes, the sad reality that comes from this whole situation is that he's starting to panic right here. His heart's racing, and he reaches into his pocket for the relic. And it sort of gives you this feeling of him trying to stop himself from, getting a little bit, him going after her. Let's do this, and jumping on top of Sarah. Like, he's trying to replace that by grabbing the pantsu. But when Edis comes over to him, it makes it very clear, at least in his mind, at least what's implying here, he sort of has a trauma with Sarah. That when he is with Sarah, he feels a trauma of when he had ET. Which this is really sad. Because again, I like Sarah's character. And I hate that this aspect here that they sort of had a bond, a connection. Yeah, and it's that idea of that it's not that I want Rudius to have to bang and marry every single woman in the entire story. I mean, I wouldn't be against it. But it's more of an aspect of like the possibilities of what could have been. It's always heartbreaking. The one that got away, it's always heartbreaking. That's a sad reality. And I think Sarah has positioned herself as the one that got away, and it's a good thing to sort of have there as a story beat. But the sad reality that comes from this whole thing is that when it comes to the idea of her trying again, her trying to see if it'll happen again, giving it one last shot, fully acknowledging that Rudius has multiple wives, why not? There's nothing against it. Rudius has accepted it. Why wouldn't you try? The sad reality that comes from it is that Sarah can't, unless Rudius is willing to try to overcome that. And I don't think Rudius is wanting to overcome. It's not that Rudius doesn't want to overcome that. Rudius is not in the mindset that I need to. Rudius is not in the mindset of going, okay, hold on, Sarah. I'm feeling a little bit of trauma right now. Let me figure that out before we can bang really quickly. No, he doesn't have a desire to establish more wives. So he's not going to go that extra mile to correct that. It could heal over time, but what it's trying to establish here is the moment that he's sitting there with Sarah, she seems like she wants to try something. She loves him and wants to see if something will happen. But all Rudius's mindset, or subconsciously and physically, his body is reliving his Edie again. It's that bad. Which is kind of interesting because what happened when they ran into each other again right here, when they first met each other at the Adventure Guild, she was mad at Eris for what she did to Rudius. And despite that, the scars of Eris abandoning Rudius is now affecting Rudius' relationship with Sarah. She's mad for what Eris did to Rudius. She's being angry for his sake. I don't like this woman. I seen what she did to you. I got to see it firsthand when you were over the top of me. And they tried a whole bunch of things. Again, in the novel, they specifically said they tried so many things. I seen it firsthand how he was broken. I seen him in those streets and all the stuff that he was trying. I mistook what he was going through. I was mad for your sake, what she did to you. But yeah, seemed to have gotten over it. Seems like it was a misunderstanding, all that kind of stuff. But the sad reality is that Sarah can't be with Rudius, or at least right here is implying that Sarah can't be physical with Rudius because he has a trauma of not performing for her because of what happened with Eris way back here. It's like a butterfly effect of trauma that eventually leads to the idea that unless Rudius goes out of his way to make a relationship with Sarah, that will never happen. She can't entice him because he's traumatized. Sucks. So bad. And she's having so much fun with him right here. And again, it implies that idea of the one that got away. It's sad. She can get with sold at. Bro sold at. Get with sold at. With that, he fell asleep. They made their way down the highway the next morning. They spotted a monolith jutting out into the sky, large enough so they could see it from a distance. As they grew closer, the smoke that curled up from the base came into focus. A town. It was Hammerpoa. It lay on the edge of the Markian mercenary country. Forgot to mention that, yes, I do recognize this name as being the name of, yes, the Ghislaine chapter. When they approached the entrance, they spotted metal signs standing beside it. It read, Hammerpoa, the smithing town. Beneath the towering monolith lay deposits of top-quality minerals, which the town folks processed into ore. With this, they did a healthy trade with other countries. As they entered, banging of metal echoed around them, much like a dwarven settlement. Despite this, few revered this place as a smithing town in practice. They called it Hammerpoa, the mercenary town. If it wasn't obvious from the name, an enormous mercenary band founded this nation. They worked as merchants of death, selling service or practicing them on their neighbors. In this economy, Hammerpoa was responsible for the production of military equipment. Mercenaries, domestic and foreign, geared up here. Almost all the world's most famous mercenary bands made headquarters here. Ruquag's mercenary band was an exception to that rule, though. They weren't world famous. But with Aisha handling it and subcontracting work out, they'll get there eventually. Rough-looking people walked the streets, but it wasn't as oppressive as the Sword Sanctum, probably because it was a relatively safe area, or the mercenaries were far more level-headed. Not that the sword god-style swordsmen were incapable of basic human conversation, it's just they had a tendency to speak with their swords. Many men stole glances at Eris. She glared back, but they just smirked and walked off. They were safe for the moment. They're like, okay, chick, whatever. Which is kind of interesting, because if you think at the Sword Sanctum, it's like, yes, people can get killed, but it's not like they're going out to kill. They're trying to train each other. Whereas like here, these people have killed. Mercenaries, they have killed. So they're going to be more likely to be like, all right, chick, whatever. All right, cool. All right. They're hired men for killing, or more likely, they're used to death. They were safe for the moment, but there was no telling when someone would stupidly provoke her. I was worried you were too confident about how smoothly our trip would go, but it looks like we're here safe and sound. You brought us this far. You know, you really saved our asses. You're sure this is as far as I need to take you? I could take you all the way out of the conflict zone if you wanted. Sarah scoffed. Even though we can't pay you, don't joke. Come on. It's not like we're strangers. You can always pay me with your body if it bothers you that much. Rhys flashed a smarmy grin, hoping it would get a rise out of her. He even made a groping gesture with his hands. All the Amazons grimaced at him. Eris snatched his wrist and glowered at him. I was only kidding. Yeah, I know. You already had your chance last night. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it, dude! Rudius. Man, you failed, dude. Missed that opportunity, Rudius. Oof, dude. She's probably teasing back, though. I don't know. I think she would totally go for it. I really do honestly think she would go for it. But there is like a side of me that kind of wonders, is just her kind of throwing it right back at him? I think she would go for it. But right there, okay, she would have gone for it back here. She was definitely all for it. But right here, I think she's obviously just poking at him. Seriously, Sarah, could you stop? She's going to shatter the bones in my hand at this rate. Wrapping his hand around Eris's, coaxing her to stop crushing his wrist, she finally pulled away. We're not children. We could take it from here. All right. Besides, seems like you got your own stuff to worry about. We'll excuse ourselves here. So, we don't get in your way. True. If Geese were in the town, there'd be a battle. He couldn't risk Sarah and Party getting wrapped up in that. Even if I did want to hire you as bodyguard, my body won't be enough for you anyway. He wanted to reassure her that it wasn't true. But judging by last night, she was probably right. Her body wouldn't work as payment. Again, this is like an oof moment. This is like a very oof. This is a really oof. Then, this is it. She nodded. Yep. I was glad to meet you again after all this time. Me too. You sure have changed a lot. I don't know how to put it. You seem like you're more distinguished than before. I don't really see how. No, remember back when the two of us almost got involved? I've been an adventurer ever since. Always doing the same thing. Never changing. I don't think that's true. As much as she wanted to downplay it, she seemed far more mature than he remembered. More of an adult. The more she talked, the more he realized the subtle differences. They only spent a couple days together, but he was sure that if he spent more, he'd notice even more. Everyone changes, even if they find it hard to see it in themselves. God, that's such a strong little statement right there. That's such a strong statement. That is like simple words with so much meaning in it. For a little bit, Sarah stared at the ground. He wondered if he should say something. If so, what? Yeah, I think that is a very, very true statement. That in a lot of cases, even though somebody feels like they have changed, I mean, let's be honest. Let's be real here. Who in the story has the worst time seeing their own potential and where they've gotten to, where they have been, and who they are now? Rudius Grey Rat. He fails all the time acknowledging how much better he is. Which, again, is a side of me that believes it's a good thing because it makes you continue to strive forward. But I think there is a moment where you have to acknowledge what you have done in your life, because if you don't acknowledge it, you will forever think that you could never do better. Even though you're doing better, you never feel like you will do better. And if you don't acknowledge how you're doing better, eventually it's going to hurt you and make you realize that you're a failure and that you might as well not try. It's sort of implying here that Rudius sees in Sarah, and it sort of implies it, Sarah can't acknowledge that she has gotten older. She has gotten more mature, and that she has grown up. And that makes sense. Again, our first impressions of her is the snarky kid. The snarky kid that just hates the noble boys. I hate them noble kids. They run away from their parents and they join us and they run away at the first chance they get. They don't realize how tough this job is and how you have to stick with things, otherwise you die. They have a family to go back to. We don't. We have to pay for our stay at the inn. We have to pay for the food on the table that night. If we don't finish this mission, we're going to starve. Now she's here, leading all these girls, protecting them, helping them out, guiding them, keeping them safe, despite having just lost their leader, who she was close to. She's grown up. She's not bickering with Rudius, not bickering with them, not getting a fight. She almost got in a fight with Eris. And again, it was kind of warranted based on what she knows about Eris. But she stopped herself. Such a strong statement. Everyone changes, even if they find it hard to see it themselves. I think it always takes somebody close to you to point it out sometimes. While he waffled back and forth, she seemed to resolve herself, lifting her head. Okay, I've made up my mind. I'm going to retire from being an adventurer. What? What? The Amazons let out an almost hysterical cry. She didn't deign to look back at them, but Rudius thought she should. They were her party members. She should be saying it to their faces. She wanted you to know. Rudius? She wanted you to know. What are you going to do after you quit adventuring? Do you have some other job that you want to do or something? Nope, no plans. Figure I'll find myself a man somewhere. Settle down, have kids, and live out my days hunting or something. It sounded like a detailed plan, but he wasn't going to contradict her. Again, she's looking at Rudius. She can't see how she's changed. She's seen Rudius. She heard his entire life story, and now she suddenly comes to this decision. I think it's through her, yes, falling in love with Rudius back here, then meeting him again, and he has quit adventuring, and he's now has a family and a life, and now she's meeting him again, and he's turned into such a great person that he is now. And yeah, didn't even take the opportunity to jump on her when he could have. Seeing how mature he is and how grown up he is and how much he's experienced and how mature he is, and falling in love with him again. I think right now she's sort of, through seeing Rudius's change in his life, is sort of desiring for herself that she kind of wants to do the same thing. She wants to settle down. She wants to have a family. She wants to see what it's like to be married and having kids. And I think it's all kind of sparked the idea of her love for him. She kind of desires for a husband like Rudius. She kind of desires for love and companionship. She just kind of desires to have a relationship with somebody. And yeah, it's kind of like that whole similar situation as Nina and Eris. Now it's sort of Sarah and Rudius. Seeing people's happiness in marriage does that. I mean, that's why a lot of people meet each other at, yes, weddings. A lot of people fall in love and meet each other at weddings. Well, you are beautiful. I only worry some awful guy will take advantage of you. Hey, don't worry. I'm going to find me a guy that won't go off to a brothel, get totally hammered, and then badmouth the crap out of me. Ouch. Ouch. This girl knows him, dude. I love this, the fact that we've only really had, like, yes, we had pretty much like a big chunk of a volume. We had like one chapter in another volume, and then this one chapter here. But like, this girl knows him and has so much stuff that she can jab him with, which does kind of make me kind of sad that Sarah didn't end up in the harem yet. It's sad that Sarah doesn't end up in the harem because I feel like she's really good at teasing him when she wants to. And I don't really feel like we get that with any other wives. Roxy, Eris, and Sylphie all have their own personalities, but not really any of them are good at being super teasy like this. Unless they're provoked. That should have stung. But to Bruce's surprise, they both smiled. Sharing the same moment of nostalgia. It was a misunderstanding, spurred by his own crappy actions following his ED. So perhaps he had no business laughing. But if Sarah forgave him enough to laugh about it, he'd join her. Well, if you ever find yourself in trouble, send for me and I'll come. Sarah nodded. Yep, and I will, if I need to. I love that. It's not a, no, it's okay. Yes, I will, if I need to. It's gonna get me emotional. The girl that got away. I like Sarah, dude. I really like Sarah. Of the love interest possibilities for Rudius, I think like she's just under Ariel, I think. Because I'm still putting Ariel in there. Roxy, Eris, Nanahoshi, Ariel. I don't know. Ariel and Nanahoshi are a hard one. And then Sarah. Then see you. Yep. Goodbye, Rudius. The one that got away, dude. It makes me sad. The one that got away. I hate it. She gave a brief wave before she headed off towards the center of the town. The rest of the Amazons chased after her. Their voices echoed as they demanded she explain her retiring. They'd soon settle to an inn and have a good squabble over her leaving. Despite appearances, Sarah was very single-minded, or bullheaded. There was a doubt anyone would dissuade her once she made up her mind. Once she made it out of the conflict zone, they'd have to disband or find a way to stick together without her. Either way, Sarah'd soon begin her new life. Ruiz hoped that, unlike someone he knew, she wouldn't go try venturing into a labyrinth by herself to find a man. Roxy. He didn't know when he'd next see Sarah, or if he ever would. If he did, he hoped they'd talk like this again. He also swore next time he'd ask her about herself too, rather than ramble on about his own life. And that's where they left it. Again, right there is that gut punch idea of like, yeah, I was too kind of flustered right there. I was too worried about kind of just blurting out everything that happened with me. I never got to like talk about her. I didn't get to learn more about her. Again, she was pulling it out of him. Yeah, tell me. Oh, we have time. Tell me. Yeah? She just wanted to talk to him. And he was too worried about other stuff. It's kind of sad. It's really sad. I really do hope that we get another chapter with Sarah, because I think that'll be that other side, and I think it's going to probably be obviously the point in which she if she does find somebody, and then he's going to probably meet her again, and then she's going to probably give him the lowdown on her life and how it's changed and how she's doing new things, and here's my kid and all this kind of stuff. We'll see. Soldat's the only person I can think of, which that would be fun. Soldat would be funny because she hated Soldat. She hated his guts. That's going to be it. If she gets with somebody, it's going to be Soldat. Mark my words. If she gets with somebody, it's going to be Soldat. Because she hated him so much, it's going to be funny. Just because it'll be funny, it'll be Soldat. I don't know. It seemed like he was, I guess he wasn't that much older than her. I don't know. I would probably say he was probably like 4 or 5 years older than her. I don't know. That would just be it. It's gonna be Soldat. Just because it'll be funny, it's gonna be Soldat. Anyways, that is chapter 8, and holy crap, what did we end up with Raw? I was really off my game today. We'll see. I'm kind of it's gonna be a butcher to edit, but I don't want to split these 2 chapters up because I'm assuming what we're gonna get into here is gonna be in crazy stuff. So, but yeah. That is it for this Mushoku Monday. Thank you guys so much for dropping by for the premiere. Hey, chat. Hope you guys enjoy this Mushoku Monday. Hope you guys are excited for next week. Thank you guys so much for your kind words, your support, everything you guys do for me. It means so much to me. And as per usual, thank you to everybody that supports channel monetarily through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships, all that stuff. It means a great deal to me. You guys are absolutely freaking amazing. So, until the next Mushoku Monday, which I'm calling it... I don't think they're going to run into Geese, because I'm thinking he's probably... I think he was there. I think he got out already. But I think they're going to find... the North God. I think this might be the place that the North God was sent. If that was the North God at Begret, I think he's going to be sent here. But it is odd that they said that he's already gone, but if they see Geese is possibly there. But that could be a lure too, just to get Roos to let his guard down. It's just Geese. That's easier to deal with. But yeah, until the next Mushoku Mondays... Y'all take care. This is particularly a Gutson, isn't it? This is practically a Gutson, isn't it? This is practically a Gutson, isn't it? This is practically a Gutson, isn't it? But the fatality rate was ridiculous. Pay wasn't half bad, but the fatality rate was ridiculous. But the fatality rate. She called all the members of her party elder sister, if he recalled correctly. She called all the members of the party elder sister, if he recalled correctly. If he recalled a beautiful place with fertile soil, a beautiful place with fertile, a beautiful place with fertile. I'm sure the sword god must be really busy. I'm sure the sword god must be very busy. Busy?